Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talking Landscape Photography. Tonight we have a very special guest. I've probably spent, we were just talking before, maybe a year trying to track down and align. We're both natural travelers, and we both have a great love for moving in different places of the world. So lining us up together with our seasons, and also internationally between America and Australia. In this case, I'm back in Tasmania, just back from WA in South Australia, and I've got my little Iceland background because I'm heading here next week. And Talor Stone here has an Arctic background of some kind. Is it polar, north or south?
It is Greenland.
It's Greenland. So,
Yes, predictably.
well, yes and no for our viewers because we're in the deep south in this part of the world, and I love using the show to bring light to different people, and the it's a really special to be able to reach out to people I know or want to know better or am inspired by or are doing things that I'm personally really interested to hear more about. And you've been one of them for a long time, Taylor. So Taylor has a very interesting background. She's free to share what little or more of it she wants to in terms of her journey to becoming a photographer. But as a photographer, she has a very broad and diverse skill set and ability. She's a very driven woman. She's a very skilled person academically and uses photography and weaves that through some of her PhD work, which we'll come up to. She has a deep passion for polar places in particular. She's a very fit. I watch her stories every every week or so and just feel like the laziest person in the world. She just currently moved home, I believe, to Vegas, but I believe she's lived in a fair few different places around the traps, and she is works for
Munch.
Munch Workshops, which
Yes.
is a big international organization that runs incredible trips all around the world, a bunch of which I personally would love to do. Yeah, she's gone from that solo to community kind of journey, which I'd personally love to connect with tonight a little bit. So I'll let Taylor tell a little bit more about herself. Tonight we've left
Sure.
the show pretty open in that I wanted Taylor to feel very free, to not feel pigeonholed about anywhere she wants to go or any particular topics or genres or style of photography or personal projects or anything. So it's probably going to be a fairly broad show, the usual conversation of me chiming in here and there. But I'm going to give the floor to you, Taylor. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul. I really appreciate you inviting me onto the show, and we finally made it happen after a bit of going back and forth trying to work out our crazy schedules. You did a wonderful introduction, but I would consider myself a polar specialist with photography and also in other parts of my life. But I also dabble in many genres and different places I work. I'm fortunate enough to work all over the world. And I definitely have had a journey to get me to that place. So I'm more than happy to share.
Yeah, where do you feel like starting? Do you want to go way back or you just hit
Mm.
the ground running with what you're doing now? It's all good either way.
Oh, well, I can give you the elevator pitch of life, you know. So I somehow started off as a girl in South Louisiana and fell in love with the Arctic. So apparently opposites do attract. And somewhere in between, I got to be a federal agent for the military, which was a weird side trip of a career, and then kind of pivoted back to photography. It's just where I always felt called. After that intro, feel free to jump in and start me off.
Where did that, I mean, Louisiana, a long way from the polar regions. How did that connection even begin and let alone develop to the level it has now?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. It was never an intentional journey, but I think that the best journeys are often the unintentional ones. Life just led me and I opened the doors as they presented themselves to me. I grew up in South Louisiana. It's very, very hot there. We lived on the bayou, so I was constantly surrounded by water and nature. And so when I was a kid, I would just run around in the swamps. My parents basically let me be feral, and I would just catch animals and play in the forest. And that's what I did. I eventually got like a little point and shoot camera, and I just was taking pictures everywhere in the swamp. None of them are any good. I was not, a gifted child with photography. But then, later on in life, I traveled to the Arctic for the first time, and something about it just captured me. And that's a whole different story. But I think the journey really started with, as a child, having that freedom to experience nature kind of on my own terms and developing that deep connection with wild places, being fearless out in nature and exploring. And when you build those skills as a foundation in your childhood, it's pretty natural that you just carry them with you throughout all of your future endeavors.
Did you have siblings involved in that kind of building a relationship and adventure type thing, or is it just a very solo thing? Or
I played a lot by myself, but also my younger brother. We would run around in the woods together sometimes, although he was not as into the creepy crawly creatures as I was. So I admittedly tormented him appropriately as a big sister with snakes and things like that.
yeah, yeah. Have you been to Australia yet?
Not yet, no.
Oh yeah, we've got all sorts of creepy crawlies here, which
Well, I hear that I'm not supposed to play with most of them.
yeah, yeah. They're some of them are fairly consequential. I grew up in New Zealand where you can just lie down on a piece of grass and sleep there for 3 days and not worry about a damn thing. So
Mm.
I remember sleeping on a canyon somewhere in the back of Utah, I think, one night, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool to sleep outside in a sleeping bag? And I slept on the edge of this cliff and just in an open sleeping bag. And some guy came up to me in the morning and said, "Bro, what are you doing?" I was like, "What do you mean?" I was just sleeping by the stars. He said, "There's these poisonous scorpions around here that just crawl into sleeping bags and just take people out." And it was like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I'm lucky I got through that night. The ignorance was bliss on that night, but I'll take a step back. So, what do you feel in terms of this polar theme? It's obviously become a big part of your life, and as the show develops and visually, we'll get more of a sense of the reality of why is what are the qualities, what are the characteristics, what are the experiences, what's the spiritual connection that has
Mm.
really just kept you so engaged and really focusing a lot of your life on those areas.
I think it's something about the temporariness of everything in the polar regions. It's not so much about fragility. I think that people talk a lot about the fragility of the polar regions. But for me, in my experiences there, and I've been so lucky to spend such a long time, or amount of time in the Arctic and Antarctica, is that it's not about the fragility as much as it is about the temporariness of everything, the temporariness of the ice, the temporariness of the seasons, of the weather, of the wildlife. Like everything is just a fleeting moment and it ebbs and flows throughout the natural cycle of the year and over decades. And there's something just really magical about feeling that and connecting with the temporariness of the landscape that you're photographing, knowing that it's never going to be the same. The next time you encounter it, it's always going to be different.
Yeah, I haven't really thought of it in terms of that the extreme sort of element of that temporary nature of it. Like when I think of moments and everywhere I go, it's always different when I visit the same places, but I guess it's a different realm when, entire
Yeah.
areas of ocean and pack ice come and go and can disappear overnight. And,
Hmm.
I haven't had as long and as deep an experience with the Arctic, but I'm looking forward to going back soon to sail about in a few weeks, actually. How do you sort of engage with that fragility aspect? I mean, that's probably a question maybe for further along a line of the show, but we already brought it up.
Yeah.
Like in terms of your choices around where you go and how you relate to it and how you use your imagery in relationship to it to relate to that story or that quality and that characteristic of those lands.
Yeah. I mean, that's a life's work that I'm still working on, right? Is like how do you honor the temporary nature of these landscapes in a way that people can connect with them? Like how do you respect them when you are there and engage with not just the landscapes, but also the people that call these places home, and respect their land and their traditions. Um, and there's actually this quote that I really just I love this quote. It captures the essence of the Arctic to me, which is that it's a place of constant becoming and unbecoming,
Oh,
a
beautiful.
world of endless anticipation. So, the ice is always forming and breaking. The sea is freezing and melting. The animals are appearing and disappearing. And all you can do as a photographer or as a hunter or as anyone who has lived in the Arctic is just anticipate all of the possibilities in the land around you. So there's just endless possibilities, and trying to anticipate those is really the way of life for the Arctic.
Well, you couldn't survive without that knowledge, is it? Like, not from an indigenous perspective. And for the viewers that don't know, Taylor is one of the few people in the world I know who has engaged with the cultural aspect of that level of fragility in these places more than anyone, particularly in Greenland. And, it's yeah, I mean, how do you even put like the Trump conversation in the middle of all this too, just to
Oh,
put a different light on it? But I'm trying to decide whether to jump ahead straight into that or go back further because part of me is still curious about, how you got the camera in the hand and who are the influences and people that start bringing that into the fore of your life
sure.
before you even go here.
It's a pretty wild story. I'm happy to tell it. Yeah,
Maybe we'll
so
get that part out of the way because I feel like we will end up spending a lot of time on the polar things in Antarctica anyway. So that's a fair way down the track, I'm guessing. I don't know what
yeah.
time frame you're talking about, and I'd be curious to know who are the people or the artists or experiences or other even forms of artwork or visual communication that kind of aligned more easily or gracefully with photography rather than others. Because I sort of feel like I could have done a lot of different mediums, and it just happens to be this one that's come to the fore, and the characteristics of its immediacy and portability are the things that really drew me to it.
hmm I wish that my path was that intentional or thoughtful, but it just really wasn't. It's kind of like all one big happy accident. So, I was going through, as a kid, I loved taking pictures and just adventuring in nature, but I never pursued photography as I got older. I didn't have a camera when I was in college. I didn't even have a camera, when I left college. I didn't own anything like that. I don't think I picked up a camera until I was maybe 24 years old. And at that time, I was going through like a particularly difficult time in my personal life. I was getting a divorce. And I decided that for whatever my reasons were at that time, that the only way I could deal with that trauma in my life was by leaving. And that's what I did. I literally I bought a camera. I got in my car. I went to Walmart of all places and bought a tent and a sleeping bag because I didn't own these things. And then I just went and lived in my car for like a year and taught myself how to take pictures. And there was no reason. I wish I had like, there was like one thing that drew me to it, but there just, for whatever reason, I just saw the world as a scary and dark place, and the camera gave me this safe way through a little box on a screen to view the world as something beautiful. And it really changed my perspective of the world around me, and using the camera as the tool to help me see the world again in a different way. I mean, it completely changed my life. I didn't know anything about photography. I'd never taken a class. I didn't even watch YouTube videos. I knew nothing. I was totally winging it. And somehow I figured it out. I don't know. It's not like I can advise that people do what I did, because I definitely don't recommend that you just go live in the desert in a Prius for a year, because that's just not like a very reasonable path.
Oh yeah, you're talking to the wrong person there, Taylor, and that's kind of something that I wouldn't have done elements of myself. So, in fact, that yeah, I got my first camera when I was 24. I had a couple of borrowed cameras from other people before that, and what I did when I finished college is I got in my car and I drove to South Island, and I was going to spend half a year on my own, just mountaineering and taking photographs. So not that dissimilar with no particular
Mm,
purpose in mind. It was just like I had the space in my life. I wanted to learn more about me. There was other things going on. It wasn't that clear where I wanted to go next. And that was a really inward time, but a really potent time and building your relationship with the natural world and your own body and the relationship between the two together and mine forged sideways from there into a career in wilderness adventure therapy where I used the wilderness as a therapeutic medium
mm.
for personal growth and development with at-risk people, and I use photography as part of that therapeutic process. So I had that. It sounds like we had a kind of a similar period and have gone in parallel since then. Not that the show's about me, but I find it interesting to so you don't feel like you're out
Yeah.
there or that's so bizarre, unusual. It makes me think,
Not the only
okay,
crazy
that doesn't
person out
sound too
here.
different. Yeah, it doesn't sound too different from me, really. So when you got into a little bit more seriously into, the technical aspects and the higher end aspects of it, or even the artistic or aesthetic aspects of it, did you find any influences that started coming into your life on some level, whether it's people or organizations or clubs or just art shows or anything that
Yeah.
kind of gave you your first kind of sense of, geez, what are other people doing? Or how do I frame this in the bigger picture of life based on what exists in the world already?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so when I was just roaming around taking pictures, I mean, I didn't have anything else to do except for wake up and go take pictures. So you get a lot of practice if that's the only thing that you're doing every single day. And that doesn't mean I was doing it particularly well. It just means that I was working on it. Someone at some point along the journey gave me this like book of a beginner's guide to photography. I don't even know who wrote it. It's just some like random thrift store find that was gifted to me. And, from that, I learned that, aperture controls your depth of field. And I'm about to embarrass myself. But of course, I wanted my pictures sharp. So I spent months taking pictures at like f/22 because I wanted them to be sharp. These are just the stupid mistakes that get made when you have no training. But what I will say is that I think that I had an advantage in that regard because I wasn't taught anything that's quote unquote right about photography. Like, no one taught me composition and no one taught me what's proper or rule of thirds. Like, these things just, I was just taking pictures the way that I wanted to. And because of that, I feel like I was able to find like my own voice fairly quickly, or like my style and the way that I love to photograph. And I did that without feeling that anything I was doing was wrong, which was really nice. But then after about that year of living in my car, just taking pictures, I thought, wow, like I really actually like this and I can see that I'm getting better. I had some money saved up, so I decided that I was going to give myself 1 year to figure out if I could turn photography into a job. And if I could do that within a year, then that's what I was going to do. And so I joined a photography club and I started talking to everyone that I could and building relationships and learning and asking questions. And, things just kind of snowballed. And really, it came down to the fact that I put a lot of effort and time and intention behind creating a community of people around me and not being afraid to ask for help. And I feel like that helped a lot because, like, I wasn't afraid of being stupid or embarrassing myself, or, because you're not supposed to just know things. It's everyone's first time.
Yeah, I feel like you gave yourself a fast track on the 10,000 hours to master your craft. There's not many people alive that have had that focused a period of time that early on to develop their skill set. I can relate to the lack of influence. I had zero influences probably the first 5 or 10 years I shot. So, and I've spoken to people that have gone to schools and they've actually felt really a little bit restricted, a little bit confused,
Mm.
when they've been told what's wrong or what's right, and it's not lining up with the path of what they're naturally moving towards. And it's actually, I've seen people experience a lot of difficulties around training more than freedom sometimes, even though they get access to a level of knowledge and historical and technical information that takes a while to get a hold of or amass yourself. So yeah, I'm feeling lots of parallels in this conversation. But uh, what do you think was within misogyny? Because not everyone. I mean, that's one of the big questions in human nature in modern time, especially for I'd say even men, is how to ask for help, and to do that by putting the ego aside and showing a bit of vulnerability and courage. And it's maybe not the most potent example of that, but it is there. So something in you must have reached a point where you're like, okay, I'm not afraid to ask. I'm not afraid to look silly. I'm not afraid to recognize what I don't know and ask for it.
Mm.
And what was
I haven't always been that way. You
yeah,
know, I would say the vast majority of my life, like, I'm very stubborn. I'm a very stubborn, very competitive person by nature. So, you know, asking for help is a practice that I have intentionally developed. It is not natural for me. I've never been naturally a person that would ask for help. I would always think that I can do it on my own. And, you know, also I don't want to embarrass myself, but I kind of just I don't know what it is that changed. I think it's just intention. Like I intentionally am fine with asking for help, and I've learned how to ask for help in a way that I feel comfortable. So, you know, starting a conversation with like, I might embarrass myself by asking you this, but I'm going to anyway. Or like, I need help with this and I feel like you can help me, you know, and like I've learned the skills to ask for help in a way that is not like, you know, off-putting and or too embarrassing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, hats off to that. That is a skill that all of us as human beings would benefit from looking at and developing on so many different levels in life. So it's a good parallel. So tell me more about the club structure and
Oh yeah.
is that a big thing in America, clubs, or is it
Camera clubs.
is it more of an older genre only, like it often is down here, for instance? Or
You know, it depends on the city and where you are, but camera clubs are super like prominent in American photography culture. Like there's camera clubs in every major city, even pretty much any decent sized city is going to have some type of camera club in it. And I personally, you know, people are going to have different experiences with camera clubs. Everyone is different. But my experience was that it was a really large active group, like 500 people. And they had weekly educational presentations, weekly photo walks, organized group events. And that was definitely a place where I could go ask the dumb questions because there's a lot of people in those groups who may not be professional photographers, but they've been taking pictures their whole lives. And, you know, it was a huge knowledge base for me. And it started off in that group just asking questions, and then people would let me try their gear, and I would learn a lot from those experiences and learn a lot about the different types of cameras. And then over, you know, period of time, they wanted to hear about my experiences traveling a lot, because I had spent so much time in places that people had wanted to travel to. So I would give presentations and talk about the travel and the experiences. And then ultimately, when it came time that I was ready to start, I didn't initially start off teaching. I started off actually at the request of a photography group to organize just a group outing. That's how everything began. That was my big break. I didn't know it at the time, but I thought I was just helping my friends out. And they asked if I would organize this group outing for the trip to go to Death Valley. And I had spent months in Death Valley, so I said, okay, you know, and I organized everything and it wasn't a business. Like, I mean, spent my own money to go there, you know, but somehow in that interaction, at the end of that trip, I realized that I actually had something of value to offer people because people who had been taking pictures for a really long time, they were asking technical questions, and I shocked myself that I would know the answers because I didn't think I knew anything. You know, it's just that classic imposter syndrome. And but they would ask me, and I would surprise myself that I would be able to help people. And after that, it just kind of snowballed because they were like, okay, well, we want you to organize more trips for the group. And I was like, well, that sounds like a business. So I probably need to like have actual like permits and insurance and stuff. So that's what I did. And that's how I got started, is because I created a community around me. And then in turn, the community that helped me grow ended up being the community that, was there to have my back when I was ready to launch. And so I can't stress how important community is, especially for anyone who's trying to get into photography as a career. Building a community, not seeing people as your competitors, but as your allies, and people that you can always work with and partner with and build each other up, and building that type of connection with everyone around you. That's the key. That's the trick.
That's a very, very powerful statement. And yeah, and I appreciate you being so clear about that and sharing with people, it's one of those big things that you and I, get asked, how do you get started and how do you go through or how do you build that kind of base and collaboration and seeing people as allies. I remember doing a talk one time where it was so present with me that I actually got the whole audience to stop, look next door, and went through these two processes. So this person, they might have a husband that pays all the bills. They got all the best cameras. They got no financial pressure on their business, and they're your competition. Like, how does that feel? Then what if you looked at that person and thought, geez, I wonder if they've got common interests with me. I wonder, gee, I think we've got something to go. What if we could swap equipment together? I wonder if there's a community project
Mm.
that we both could do that would naturally align with, and it's the same person, but a completely different mindset. And I get
Yeah.
people to do a group exercise in the audience around that, between what one is and the other. And it's interesting, I think, photography in general, particularly wilderness photography, I could argue probably in general is a fairly soloist pursuit. And it's not necessarily gravitating immediately or obviously in terms of how to make that a collective pursuit or how to build a community in that. And that's been a big journey as well for my end. And again, similar from the club point of view, I'd stress the same depending on where you are in the world, I guess. But where was the sort of next step from there to here? Like, is there much of a dot line between here and there, or is it a quick jump to what you're doing now?
Well, somewhere along the line, in like my very first year doing or taking photography seriously, I I spontaneously I just bought a ticket to Greenland. I mean, I literally wish that there was a better reason, but there is no better reason other than the fact that I couldn't sleep one night. And I was feeling very frustrated with the world around me and bored with how tame it all felt. And so I tried to find the craziest place that I could go that I'd never known anyone else to travel to. And I just bought a ticket and I went. And the rest feels like it just snowballed out of control after that because I didn't know that that impulse purchase in the middle of the night was going to completely change my life. You know, like I didn't know that like that decision was going to define the trajectory of my career or my academic pursuits or, so much of my life now has been based around that one trip.
Well, we have a very opportune moment here to shift this into a visual realm if you want to. It's probably an appropriate
Sure.
time, I think. And as I was talking to Taylor before, it's part of the beauty of this particular platform is we can really lean into the visuals more than on a podcast or other things, and why not make the most of that? So
Sure.
does that feel
Yeah,
like time for you, Taylor, to start
totally.
bringing it
Let's
into the
see.
visual realm for us?
That works for me. Let me share my screen then. All right, so you'll recognize this shot from my background. So, my journey through Greenland kind of started in Western Greenland. I think that's where a lot of people start off because it's a little logistically more simple. And it's also where I started kind of developing my style with polar photography. I really love that feeling of the dreamscape. And we talked earlier about how temporary everything feels, and I love to showcase that in my polar photography. So for me, it's the fog and the etherealness of the polar landscape is always what draws me in. So this is from one of my first trips to West Greenland. Let's see.
Taylor, can you go
Uh,
full screen?
sure.
Is that easy to do?
Oh, is it not full screen?
Oh,
Is it
it's only a tiny bit on the top and bottom that I'm seeing. Just the icons. I don't. It doesn't matter too much. It's 90% of the screen.
okay? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So again, West Greenland.
I don't think people understand the sense of scale in Greenland. So I'll
Well,
let
having the little
I'll let you
bird in
speak
there.
to that. Yeah, yeah. Even compared to somewhere like Svalbard, where I have been, I know Greenland is a whole other realm again.
Yeah, it's hard to describe the scale of Greenland. I've been really lucky to travel to pretty much every corner of Greenland, north, south, east, west. And every corner of Greenland is very different from the rest. You know, they all have their unique characteristics, but West Greenland in particular is really famous for these huge icebergs. These icebergs can be 100 meters out of the water.
Wow.
So imagine how deep they are underneath. And sometimes they can be 1 or 2 kilometers long. And so they're literally they're New York City blocks, they're skyscrapers, and the scale is just really difficult to capture or convey. I often use like small seabirds to help try and capture the scale of the landscape, but really the only thing that could possibly do it is if you stood there yourself.
I have heard that, and I am hoping to do that.
Yes, yes, you really have to. Let's see what else I have in here. Also, West Greenland, there's a fair bit of wildlife, some beautiful humpback whales, Arctic foxes. When I first, I wish I had a fox picture in this group, but when I first traveled to Greenland, I went with a tent, um, and like no plan because I'm just not I don't plan like a lot. I do for work, but for myself, I'm just going to show up. And so I just showed up with a tent and just hiked into the backcountry and lived in a tent and explored the wilderness there. And you can hike along these fjords where there's all the ice. A lot of these pictures are from that. And there are just loads of Arctic foxes if you get out of the city, and they'll come right to you and sniff you and try and see what you're about. It's really pretty amazing. But the whales do this amazing behavior in West Greenland, and if you pay attention and observe what they're doing, they bring these schools of fish in during the summer to these icebergs. And these icebergs, like I said, are just massive and they're huge under the water and they run for a very long distance. And so the group of whales will herd the fish up against the ice so they can't escape. And then they'll all feed together, and they'll do some bubble feeding there as well. And so it's this really interesting coordinated animal behavior for hunting, which is just super fascinating to watch.
So how deep would it be there? I mean, it looks like they're so close to the walls and they're vertical, and that's sort of one of the more vertical dives I've seen, I think. Often they're a little bit more lateral. So
Yeah.
like, wow, that's like almost like standing vertical.
Yeah, this whale was really putting on a show. It was just totally I don't know what it was doing. It was definitely posing for us because it wasn't even like normally fluking. It literally just did a handstand for us. It was so wild.
Yeah, it's quite different from any tail shots I've seen actually.
Yeah, pretty magical. It was a great experience. It's always a wonderful experience there. I can't wait to return next year. I mean, it's just, I'll be in East Greenland later this year, and then next year in the summer, I get to go back to West Greenland again. So it's a pleasure every single time. And you know, it never gets old because, like I said, everything is always in transition. So none of these icebergs will be there. Everything's going to be different. And so it doesn't matter how many times you visit, you're guaranteed a different result. So it's very fun as a photographer. See.
How many trips now?
How many, I'm sorry.
How many journeys to Greenland have you been on so far?
Oh my gosh. I've never thought about that.
Really?
Well, last year was interesting because I got 4 trips to Greenland in a single year.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, and it was north, south, east, and west. So I got to do it wasn't on my bucket list, but check.
Well, that
Um,
speaks a bit more to both the scale and also the geology. I know that's one of the most
mm,
phenomenally unique and arresting parts visually and geologically, I guess, as well for those that are more academically minded in terms of Earth creation. But maybe
yeah.
stick with that on the right-hand side of the frame here. What sort of rock structures are most prevalent in Greenland? I guess it changes where you are in the whole scheme of things.
There's a lot of variation across Greenland. So the west and South Greenland is a lot of granite, and so West Greenland doesn't have a lot of mountainous area because it's all been glaciated and ground down. But South Greenland, I have some pictures in here. I mean, there's some of the biggest granite walls on Earth. Like there's some of the highest objectives for rock climbers. So I'll show you some pictures in a bit about that. It's pretty insane. And this is Northeast Greenland. And you get into a lot of other sedimentary type layers. And the geology of Northeast Greenland is really spectacular. It's just unbelievable. The scale is really hard to convey because the size of that iceberg, I mean, that iceberg is it, it's the size of a house. I mean, that's a huge iceberg. But you just cannot tell that at all from the image. Yeah, it's
What's
just the
the most
scale is
prevalent? Do
immense.
you normally travel around and through Iceland by boat? I mean, through Greenland by boat, or does it depend on where you are?
Yes. Yeah, it depends on where you are, but boat is really the only way to travel. There's no roads that connect anything, and really by water is the way. That is definitely the way to travel. Let's see. This is also Northeast Greenland. Some crazy, beautiful fog, and you can really see those sedimentary layers of rock that are just unbelievable. You can just count the millennia.
Oh,
This is a island. It's called Ella Island in Northeast Greenland, and it just provides a really stunning backdrop for photography.
yeah, you don't say. Oh,
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, the little dusting of snow. This particular day was pretty magical with the low cloud.
How seasonal is it in terms of accessing and being able to travel through even by boat? Like, are there times a year
It
where
de
it's not an option, or is it
Oh
depending
yeah.
on?
It's totally seasonal. It depends on where you want to go and the ice, but generally the time to visit Greenland is between June to September, typically. But it has a lot of variation depending on where you want to go and what's ice free. So you can always get the ice charts, and you get really good at reading them if you go to Greenland a lot.
That's partly why I asked because I knew that and I thought 4 times in a year they're probably not going to be necessary at all in that one window and I thought maybe you might have been doing something overland or sled dogs. I don't know, something different to get around. But
Yeah, it's a challenge. If you aren't going by boat, then you're kind of limited to just that one little area that you're in because it's only as far as your feet will carry you. And depending on where you are, that may not be a safe option because there's polar bears. So,
yeah,
yep,
I
you
mean,
got.
have you developed any of your own kind of licensing around carrying firearms and dealing with that, or you just go with guides, or how do you work that?
Yeah, it depends on where we are. So in West Greenland, like the Disco Bay region, you don't generally have to worry about polar bears in the summertime. But in a lot of the areas that I have traveled, like South Greenland and East Greenland, I'm usually the one with the rifle. So Greenland's a different world when it comes to gun regulations. You call a guy, you say, "Hey, I need a gun." And when your plane lands and you walk off the plane on the tarmac, he just hands you a rifle. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
not even joking. That's literally how it is.
bit tighter than Svalbard.
Yeah, so, just hands you a gun and says be safe. And he doesn't charge you for the bullets unless you use them. So there's that.
And I'm hoping you haven't had to use them.
Well, occasionally you just want to shoot things for fun. So I am American after all.
Oh, I love that. Is this looks like a top-down shot, yeah?
Yeah, it's a drone shot of a calving on a glacier front. It
How do
just looked
I
like
mean,
a
it
tree to me. So,
must be an amazing place to drone, but I guess there's such big scale, there's the limitations there as well
oh,
we can cover, but
the drone is amazing in Greenland. Oh, the drone is amazing.
yeah.
Yes.
I just renewed my Norwegian drone license this week actually for Svalbard, so I got to fly there last time, but I was trying to think, that the scale of Svalbard is lower and smaller than Greenland. There must be things that you just can't even get above, or there's
Oh, I mean, there's
mountains
definitely
are
stuff
so
that
big.
you can't get above, but oftentimes the going in Greenland is so challenging on the terrain that the drone is really the only way to photograph a lot of things because it's just not practical to physically get there. I have some images. This isn't one of them, but this is not from a drone, but this is East Greenland as well. This iceberg is just
That looks
unbelievably huge.
colossal, absolutely colossal. Now that you've given it, a more present understanding of scale, it's like, oh my Lord,
I mean, for
that's
scale,
like a city block.
we were on a ship that was probably about 40 meters, and it's like an expedition vessel. And this iceberg was more than twice the size of our ship. I mean, and much taller. So it's a small mountain, small mountain of ice.
What are those sort of rules or regulations in terms of proximity? Like particularly in Svalbard, like glacial walls, it's like 200 meters is the closest you're allowed. Is it a little bit more loose in Greenland, or I mean, glacial
Well,
a little bit different than icebergs, but
there's certainly practices that you should follow, which is two times the distance. So, or two times the height of the iceberg is how close you should be. Of
yeah.
course, I mean, there's no police out here, so hurt yourself if you dare, you know, but
Have you seen many flip?
you do see them, and trust me, it reminds you why it's important not to get too close.
Yeah, or maybe explain what that means to people that might not know.
So there's such a large piece of the iceberg that's underwater. I mean, it's like anywhere from 90 to 70% of the iceberg is actually under the water. And so occasionally they will roll over. And when that happens, it can be extremely violent and very impressive to witness.
And very scary if you're either on it or near it.
Very scary if you are too close. So you definitely we keep our distance from these guys. It's just not worth it. Let's see. Just I could literally photograph ice for the rest of my life. Like if that was the only subject, if I had to pick one, I would photograph ice because it just it has an infinite amount of qualities to it. It can be any shape that you can't find anywhere else in nature, right? The ice can be in any whimsical shape, like a sculpture. It will reflect any color of what's around it. It can be blue, it can be pink, it can be purple. And it's always just changing. And it has this quality of light. So it's an endless playground, a never ending subject. Depending on what angle you approach ice from, you get different characteristics. It's just really, um, that would be my choice. That would be my submission. What would be yours, Paul? The only if you
Well,
could only photograph one thing for the rest of your life.
yeah, it's a tricky one, but what I feel like you have insight to now, we'll get further along the line as to why and how is the level of descriptive qualities to ice that the Inuit people in particular have access to. It would just blow our minds. And maybe you can speak a little bit to that. We're already talking about the qualities of ice, and you've got insight into it in a way that most of us don't, or may never, or maybe never will.
Yeah, I mean, so the communities that I have worked with, their understanding of ice is really the source of their life, you know, because as tourists in this land, I see Greenland generally when there's open water, but that totally misses the fact that in most of Greenland, like 9 months out of the year, the sea is frozen. And during that time period, that that surface becomes the lifeblood of that community. It's the road that they travel on. It's the platform that they hunt from. It's what connects villages that are not connected the rest of the year and connects families that live in different areas that can't see each other otherwise. And so having this deep, intimate knowledge of the ice and what is safe and how to travel on it is really like a fundamental part of the culture in Greenland. I mean, in a way that even I could never fully appreciate, no matter how hard I tried.
Do you know, like, I mean, it's not necessarily a measurement, but my understanding is there's a huge amount of number of words or
hmm
nuances to ice that w would boggle the mind. Is there a sort of sense of scale in terms of that? Like you would have tapped into it a little bit, I guess, in terms of how many and how varied a level of descriptions there are around ice.
Yeah, well, I'm not a linguist in that way, but I do know just from experience that there are so many ways to describe ice. And there's different words for each different type of ice and different seasons for the ice and the age of the ice and the depth of the ice. And, there's a different word for each. But that goes beyond ice, in the hunting communities. It's also about like the animals because there's a there's a general word for like a ring seal, for example, that's broad in general. But then there's also a word for a juvenile, a word for a female, a word for a 1-year-old female, a word for a 2-year-old female, a word for a mature breeding male. Like there's like dozens of words that all encapsulate this one animal, and it's really pretty amazing. And also really, really difficult if you're trying to learn anything.
Yeah, yeah, that's a lifelong pursuit, that one.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Let's see. I got a couple others. Of course, you have the aurora in Greenland, so you can't miss a chance to photograph that. This image was in South Greenland, and the tide had pushed in all of these icebergs on, and then the tide left, and they were all stranded there. And normally, you wouldn't be able to do a long exposure with icebergs because they move.
Yeah, I was
But
thinking about
because they were stranded, it was actually like a really good opportunity
that. Fair
to use
opportunity.
them.
Yeah, yeah. How
Yeah.
how wide a shot is that?
Probably about 15 millimeters or so.
Yeah, it's not a panorama, it's a single shot.
No, it's a single shot. And so this night, I, last year, with a couple of friends, we split the cost of a sailboat to go explore South Greenland together. And so this night, we had just arrived in Narsarsuaq in South Greenland and had just gotten to the boat. And then all of a sudden, the aurora just went crazy, and we just scattered. The level of panic that sets in with photographers when something like this happens. I mean, we just everyone ran a different direction to try and get a photo. It was pretty amazing. And the aurora went for so long this night that we actually just stopped taking pictures. Like at a certain point, like you're just done, and it was still going.
We've had 8 out of the last 9 nights in a row with auroras here in Tasmania. Literally.
Amazing.
And myself and Luke, who also runs a show, and Andrew and Ben, we're yeah, we're just developing a full Aurora exhibition and workshop program that's coming out in August here in Tasmania, actually. So you wouldn't have thought about it. Australia is not really a great Aurora place in general, but Tassie's just enough south that we actually get quite regular access to it, and our air quality is so incredible. And so crisp, apart from when it gets cloudy, of course, which a lot of the last few nights have been. Yeah, so it's well, but I want to learn more a little bit about the differences between the Borealis and the Australis. Like the ones that I've seen in the north, they're generally very green orientated. They're generally very overhead, I guess, because you're right under the auroral oval, and here in
Mm,
Tasmania we're quite distant from where the oval is, and so we get more of a side-on profile, and we often get a much bigger color range, I think, as a result, because of all the different
mm,
nitrogen and oxygen and layerings of atmosphere that we're viewing it through, if that makes sense. And you
yeah.
that your experience has been very kind of green biased, and and they're often quite above your head, or is it quite?
Well, like I think you're correct that it has to do with where you are in relation to the band of the aurora, where it's going to appear, and some about the color of it. In fact, in Greenland, generally like middle to South Greenland, it's going to be overhead, but in North Greenland, you may not ever see it at all, just because you're so far north, you're literally too far north to see it. So that also can be the case.
Yeah,
So I,
yeah, Svalbard, I think is similar. Like in the northern part of Svalbard, you're too far north.
mhm.
You actually got to
You're
look
too far
south.
north.
You
Yeah,
got to look
yeah.
south to see the northern lights.
Isn't that crazy? That's wild. But
Because
when it does happen,
more
it's
about where
magical every time.
it's more about where that magnetic pole is in a lot of ways, or where the magnetic sphere is interacting, which isn't necessarily geophysically where you think it might be, is what
Right.
I think. But what time of year
Yeah.
do you get there to be able to experience this? Because if that window is July, September, which is largely probably 24 hours of daylight, where are you arriving where you get access to this?
You'll start getting it maybe in late August. You'll start seeing it in late August. This particular picture was in late September. So, um, yeah, late August, you can start around West Greenland, South Greenland. Yeah.
What sort of daylight hours are you getting in August and September there?
A lot. A lot of daylight.
Brilliant.
Yeah. It changes pretty rapidly. I think it's like I want to say it's like 10 minutes per day at certain latitudes in terms of how much it changes. I think further north you get like 12, 15 minutes per day difference in the amount of light because of just how far north you are. So, at the beginning of August you get no nighttime at all, and then by late August you'll get a couple hours, so it's possible to see it.
Huh, that's what I was wondering. I was thinking, yeah, that seems pretty close to summer, but yeah, 15 minutes a day, that's a pretty fast turnaround.
Pretty fast turnaround. Like when it starts turning, it turns. It turns quick. Let's see. This is that sailboat that we booked together, just a couple of friends. There were some parts of South Greenland that I had always wanted to see and never had a chance to. And the only way to get there is by boat. So it took a bit of juggling, but we all just chipped in and decided to do
I
it
was,
ourselves.
I can't tell you how much I was salivating over this trip, Taylor. I was like, it's just every day. I was like, you've got to be joking. The conditions you got, the places you get to, the fun you were having, and I was in the back of my mind. I was also thinking practically, geez, how much does it you have to save up to try and pull off a trip like that? Like private.
Yeah, it was not cheap, but it might not be as expensive as you think. I think the sailboat charter was about 32 thousand US dollars, but we split it among like 6 people. You're there for 2 weeks. It includes all the food. So, I mean, it's not cheap, but it was completely worth it. This trip was completely ridiculous in every way. We had the most insane conditions. We had such a good group of people. We camped on shore almost every night so that we could photograph the aurora and explore and hike, and it was really amazing. And you can also see how impressive the granite walls in South Greenland are. I mean, they're really absolutely ridiculous.
Oh my.
Yeah. So this is also South Greenland. Again, like I said, the drone, because you do not want to walk through that
I
that
was going to say, it
bog.
looks super sensitive to walk through and very boggy.
It takes the phrase bushwhacking just to the extreme in Greenland because the terrain is boggy, it's brushy, you can't see where you're going. I mean, it's really hard going in Greenland, so the drone is a lifesaver. Also, people don't think about fall foliage in Greenland, but let me tell you, in South Greenland, the fall foliage is off the chain. It is
And I guess
unbelievable.
I guess that was part of the design and timing of this trip, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the fall foliage was a big attraction. I mean, the whole tundra turns red and orange and yellow, and it's really to have icebergs and fall foliage together, that's pretty cool. Yeah. Another drone image. I love the tiny little boat in there for scale.
Yeah, I guess you wanted to come across too many people, but depends on where you go, I guess.
Yeah, these were a couple fishermen that came down to end of the fjord, and we were very surprised to see them. They're a long way from a village.
So how did you choose that particular boat or captain or crew and how much did you design the itinerary as opposed to, getting influence from them or how much was pre-designed, how much was customized?
Um, so I had some personal connections with a sailboat charter company, and we were able to get them to do this special trip for us on their way out of Greenland for the season. Like they were done for the season, and I was like, "Yeah, but you have to sail by South Greenland to leave." So maybe you could stay a little while for me. And I actually did the vast majority of the research with a bit of help from the other people who joined me, and because the sailboat had never been to this place before either. And so we did all of the research and spent days and days and days on Google Earth and Gaia and trying to figure out where to be and looking at satellite imagery. And because this area has been very, very rarely photographed. I mean, almost nobody has been out here to photograph these locations. And so we didn't really have anything to tap into. So, and a lot of what we photographed has not been photographed seriously before, and that was a cool experience to be like, I feel like in today's day and age, you frequently are photographing things that you have already seen images of elsewhere. You know, the Wanaka trees, the Mesa arches, the Utah Badlands. Like we've all seen pictures of this, and sure, you can find your own spin on it, maybe, and sure, they're still worth photographing, but you kind of have this mental idea of what it is. And for this trip, we had no no idea what the hell it was. You just look at a satellite and you say, I bet I can camp there, and you go and you figure it out.
It's rare I've come across a visual adventure that I just left jaw dropped by. And its uniqueness and freshness and the spirit of it and the amount of adventure woven through it was really clear and a big acknowledgement to you, Taylor. Your stories are phenomenal and super engaging and I too find a lot of freedom around stories that I don't find in posting. And I find that for some reason more under the microscope a bit harder in stories I feel a lot more freedom around
Mm.
and yeah, various parts of my week often pop up with incredible journeys with this, but this just had me absolutely glued, Taylor, this trip. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, well, thank you. It was honestly, I would go back in a heartbeat. But the challenge is to find a boat. There's no one who operates in this area really, not like a small charter at least. And so pretty much anyone that you would ask would have to sail there for it, and that makes it really logistically and cost prohibitive. I just kind of had a lucky set of circumstances. But look, if you want to go, Paul, all you have to do is ask. I'll find a way.
I'll put both hands up there, Taylor.
I will
Both hands,
find a way.
2 feet, 10
Yeah,
toes.
it was honestly, it was worth every penny that it cost, and I would do it again in a heartbeat and not even think twice, because even though we got to spend 12 days in these beautiful fjords, we barely scratched the surface on what they have to offer. I mean, the entire time I was there, all I could do was daydream about coming back and doing it again. So I'll find my way back eventually.
Let's keep looking at some more.
Yeah. So I can actually, let me stop for a moment and then I can share. I have a couple images from the hunting communities in northern Greenland, if that works for you. And then I can talk a little bit about that.
This is all your platform, Taylor, to get that like.
All right, let's see. Let's share that. All right. So, I
Yeah.
guess we kind of mentioned it earlier briefly, but I my love of Greenland has transformed a lot over the years. So it started with just a random plane ticket to some random place because I needed to get away. And I came back from that trip so interested in Greenland and so enamored with what I saw that I actually enrolled in a PhD program that year just so that I could study Greenland. Which I know that that sounds insane, but I'm a perpetual student. I love learning. I've always loved learning. I have always strove to be as educated as possible on the things that I care about. And so when I realized that I was just falling in love with Greenland, I decided to build some structure and some intention behind learning about it. And so that path has carried me for the last almost 7 years now, because PhD programs take a very long time. So I've spent about 6.5 years now working on my PhD, and I have refined my field over that period of time. And now my focus is really on the hunting communities in northern Greenland and how these hunting communities interact with the globalized world. And so I really explore that a lot through photography. And I've been so fortunate to spend time living with the hunters and observing their way of life and speaking with them, interviewing them. It's been pretty life-changing of an experience. And yeah, I have some pictures from that. So I
How did you
spent,
how did you even begin there? This bouncy, determined US redheaded lady turning up in these remote areas of Greenland with all these ideas of her own, and they're just doing their thing. How did you sort of
well,
ingratiate
you
yourself
know what? It's because two things. First, you don't just show up. This took years of coordination before I was invited
to the point?
to the community. And then the other thing is that you don't turn up with your own ideas. You just turn up to listen.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really, I just cannot stress how important that is. When when my research pivoted towards the hunting communities, I part of that is because I looked inward at my own hypocrisy in what drew me to Greenland. I mean, it was unintentional hypocrisy. It's innocent, right? So I was drawn to Greenland by this desire to experience something wild and pure and just wilderness in its rawest form. And I think that's the association that most people have with the Arctic landscape, which is understandable. That's how it's portrayed to us. That's like the popular narrative. It's about this fragile, vulnerable place that is pure and wild and free. And the reality that I learned is that like Greenland is it's a indigenous homeland. Like it's it is the homeland of people who have their own agency and their own experiences, and that my view of their world was not accurate or limiting of like their it was limiting of their experiences. And I think that really got me curious and it got me willing to listen to what people had to say, and to kind of deconstruct some of my own thoughts about what Greenland was. Um, and I think that that reframing helped me get my foot in the door because I can assure you that these hunting communities are not a place that you just show up.
Yeah, I mean that was my that wasn't an ignorant question. It was an invitation to talk about. Geez, that's such a different
Yeah,
universe, and why or how would they even have a positive kind of what's the word? Like, why would they allow you to come into the
right.
what's in it for them, and how do you build trust in a community that's kind of being assaulted in some ways globally by globalization and threat.
Hmm.
So, and that must
There's
be quite
just,
a dance, like
yeah,
yourself in there.
there's there's a super long history that you have to understand to be able to be in a place like this, which is that Greenland is a colony, first off. They are still a protectorate, which is a really nice way of saying a colony of Denmark. There's a lot of bad blood about that. These hunting communities in northern Greenland were forcibly removed from their land by the US military base when we decided to establish it there. And none of that was cleared with them. And it was just a period of deep cultural trauma in the history of this community. And then in the more modern era, most of the non-Indigenous people that they encounter are scientists and researchers who are there to talk about how the ice is melting and to count animals and then tell them how many they're allowed to eat. Which, so they don't have a positive association with outsiders. They're reasonably skeptical of anyone who looks like
Yeah, and
me.
fairly so. It was
Yeah, and
pretty rough that the US military side as well. That was pretty abrupt and no questions
yeah,
asked, really forced on them. And I don't
yeah.
even know
It's
how that translates now to Trump's sort of politics and suggestions around things. I've heard you speak to other aspects of that, but I haven't sort of put that very last year, 6 months or a year of filter over the whole conversation of what's happening there.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's kind of interesting because in 2019, when he first publicly said something about buying Greenland and it was all over global news, I was actually camping in this small village of like 20 people, and people had a lot of questions for me. And I was just like, I don't really know what's going on. So that was wild. And then, when I was in northern Greenland the last time, it was prior to these most recent, you know, desires to own Greenland. Um, you know, I found it kind of surprising that quite a few people had positive views of Trump in the community, but I believe that has changed a lot now because at the end of the day, Greenland is not for sale. And if anything, the Greenlanders want to be independent and they want to, have their own, uh, you know, views of the world represented in their communities, and they don't want to certainly be colonized by another Western power. So, yeah, it's quite interesting.
Let's see some more of these beautiful people
Yeah,
culture.
for sure. Yeah, so in this image, we're just out on the sea ice. It was just a beautiful day. I had to hop off the sled and take some pictures.
Just before you go, like if we go back to, I don't even know how to put into words
Yeah.
that quality of light, that level of luminosity, that level of
Ugh.
dimensionality, that it doesn't really exist almost anywhere in the world that I've seen like this.
Mm-mm.
And it's almost impossible to even put into words. The subtlety and the grace and the quiet power of it as well is oh, it's so arresting. It's gives me tingles.
Yeah, polar light is special. Like, there's something about the quality of it. And, when you breathe out and your breath just crystallizes before your eyes, I mean, it's a magical landscape. You almost forget for a moment how cold your toes are. Because this was a pretty warm day. I would say it's like negative 15 Fahrenheit this day. So that's like maybe negative 20 Celsius or so.
Oh, it's
But there were some days that we were out there that it was negative 40 Celsius. And that hurts.
oh
It
my
hurts
God.
it hurts in a really unique kind of way.
Yeah, not for
Um,
everyone.
yeah. So, one if you ask me what the soundtrack of Greenland is, it's the sound of the hunting dogs howling. Like
Yeah.
that's just the sound of Greenland. Because if you're in any of the small communities, that sound is just everywhere all the time. The howling dogs. Um, yeah, these sled dogs are really the lifeblood of these small communities. This is still the predominant mode of transportation. So,
Mm.
yeah, but we don't pet the
But
dogs.
yeah, I was gonna say, what is the dynamic
Mm,
between
you
people
know,
and dogs? How much of it is love, how much it is service, how much of it is practical, how much it is personal. Like I guess it's all of the above, I guess.
The dogs aren't pets, right? And for people who are visiting Greenland for the first time, it's just essential that you understand that the dogs are not pets, because if you think of them as pets, then you'll be very upset about their living conditions. But, the dogs are tools. They're bred for exactly what they do. And the hunters do take a lot of pride in their animals. I mean, just the same way that you would take care of your car, right? Because essentially these are their car. This is their four-legged car.
Yeah, yeah.
So they depend on these animals to get around and to hunt. This is Lisa. So
Yeah.
my first time
Holding a
in the
picture. What's it?
hunting.
Looks like
I'm
a
sorry.
it's a seabird of some kind, or what's she got?
Yeah, it's a auk. It's a small seabird. So I love this picture so much because it captures really what a modern hunting community is. So Lisa's 5. She was my host family's little girl, and we spent a lot of time playing together. During this week that we were out, we were hunting for these seabirds. I have a picture of how we hunt for them in a moment. But Lisa was participating in the hunt, even at 5 years old. She's actively participating, but she wore a princess crown every single day to go hunting. And to me, like that is subsistence hunting in the modern world. Like if there's one photo, this is the photo for me because it's a world where an indigenous community doesn't have to choose between maintaining their traditions and being a Disney princess. Like you don't have to pick. You can be all of it, and that is what globalization means for these communities. I think that there's a lot of like crisis narratives about globalization in indigenous communities, and certainly not all of it is a rosy picture. There's downsides to everything. So I don't want to minimize the challenges, but the benefits are often overlooked. Like kids can grow up and dream of doing something like being a doctor and envision these new futures and grow up envisioning wanting to be a Disney princess, but then also still be a huntress. And to be able to have that is really like this unique blend. And, despite all the challenges that may come with the modern world encroaching on these indigenous communities, the benefit is just also huge.
What defines subsistence hunting? What does that mean by definition?
Yeah, so they're primarily eating food that they catch.
Gotcha.
So in not every person in these communities, but many of them are hunters or hunting families, and the hunters will catch food that generally is sold within the community. So they're feeding within the community. And I would say in these communities, there's some families that are still going to be like 90+% food that they caught out in nature. And a lot of them are 50% or more food that was caught in nature. So seals, narwhals, auks, polar bears, musk oxen. So you name it, they catch it.
Yeah.
um,
I was just going to say, is there kind of a, I guess it's very seasonal and maybe geological, where people are as to what they're capturing and how much
yeah.
and what forms the basis of their diet from season to time of year.
Yeah, there's a lot of variation throughout the year depending on the ice and the availability of species, but also now they have like a new constraint in the last 20 years or so, which is the implementation of the quota system. And so now,
Where
um,
did that come from in the first place?
mm, yes, well, it's complicated. See, if you ask a question like this of a PhD student, you're likely to get like a,
Oh, yeah,
a
yeah.
detailed
Well,
answer.
that
So
is-
actually, like the idea of species conservation is an Inuit practice. Like that is they in 1920. I'm going to be a liar. Someone's going to fact check me on this. Like 1915 to 1920, somewhere in there, there was this agreement that was made among all of the people there called Tule Law, where they agreed to not hunt certain animals during certain times of year so that they could breed, and they agreed to limit the catch of certain animals and all of these things because the advent of firearms threatened the availability of species in the area. So they all got together and they said, okay, well, we have to make some rules so that we continue to have animals to eat. And then later on, in the 80s and 90s, the animal rights movement really took off, and it's an example of unintended consequences of well-intended policies, right? So, the animal rights movement and the government regulation that followed that is all well-intended, and there have been wonderful impacts with that worldwide. But one of the downsides is that it restricts a lot of the hunting lifeways of these indigenous communities. Um, it's really hard when someone needs to feed their children and they say, sorry, the quota's been used up for the year. Like, you
Yeah.
can't control it when you're hungry. And like, that's the choice that a lot of these families are faced with right now. It's a huge challenge to their daily life.
And I guess it's very species specific, I imagine, but how tenable is it to maintain that? How much are the resources dwindling in terms of different food sources as well, just through what's happening through globalization and or climate change?
It's I think that the species are actually fairly stable in the area that these communities are hunting. It has actually a very, very stable polar bear population, historically, even today, when they're still being hunted. And there's been some good stability in the narwhal population in recent years, especially with the stricter quotas. Um, there's a lot of challenges with walrus availability, but that's less about the quotas and more about the disappearance of sea ice. And as the sea ice retreats, the walrus go with it. So, um, there's nuance with each species, but yeah, I mean, there's animals there for them to catch for sure. So it's a very difficult dance for these communities between following the rules, but also you have to eat. Um, and if you're a hunter, you get your food from the land. You're not getting it from the store, which costs money. And, these people, most people in these communities, particularly the hunters, are very, 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 very poor. So they're not buying their food at the grocery store.
Oh man.
Yeah. So this is we had caught a bunch of birds that day and we were cleaning the birds so that we could eat them later. They taste very good. They taste like duck. They're super tasty.
And which birds are these?
These are the auks.
Ox.
Um, yeah, they're called little auks. They basically look like a small puffin.
Yeah, I'm
And
about
there's
photographing puffins next week, so I
yeah.
might be thinking about eating them though.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they would taste the same, but these are pretty tasty, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
you wouldn't take stock too well of being vegetarian up there, I imagine.
well, there's no vegetables to eat.
Exactly. I think I saw a
Uh,
video of this. I think it was on your website actually. I was having a look last night. It's so fast. This flock just exploded through, and then it's just gone in a second. Like, how do you know
oh,
when and how they're going to come past that particular spot, and do they have to keep moving around because the birds start knowing that there's going to be somebody waiting for them, or is it just yeah?
yeah. I mean, it's wild. So, I mean, this was my first time observing this practice. And, it seems like there are 33 million nesting pairs of little auks.
Wow, that's a lot.
33 million pairs. That's a lot of birds. And they're all flying around, and you think surely you just stick a net up and you catch one, right? But I can assure you that is not at all what happens because I tried for like a week straight to catch one and I never did. Um,
I remember in this
so,
particular video, about 2 seconds after this guy's empty.
I mean,
I'm like, how
it's
did he even know they were going to come through in that direction or that place? It's just patience, I guess, and
Patience and understanding the animal
Understanding
behavior. Like
the animal behavior.
they deeply understand the behavior of this animal when your life depends on it. You know, your livelihood is this animal. And the children learn this skill from very young, like as young as 5 years old, they're already trying and learning and practicing this skill. And I observed a lot what they do. And what's happening is they're watching the birds and they're identifying a specific bird that they want to catch. It's not random. They're picking the bird that they're catching.
Mm.
And when they bring this hoop up, it's actually parallel to the bird so that the bird can't see it. It just sees the line. And then at the very last second, the hunter will flick his wrist and it pivots the net to be a hoop and the bird can't evade it.
Ah,
It's too
okay.
late. But it's like it is lightning fast,
It
the
is so
speed at
fast.
which this happens. And also like this hoop is really like to move it quickly requires a great amount of physical strength. And they're catching like 500 of them a day. So,
500. Oh, wow.
yeah. I mean, it's
That's a lot.
really it's incredible. It's incredible. And I mean,
What
and
sort of
but
size of village would be capturing 500 a day?
well, I mean, a lot of these are they're personal, you know, they're going to put them in a freezer. They bury them under the ground so that they can eat them later. I mean, it's, you know, you have this seasonal abundance.
Okay, well,
And so you catch your food and like you will continue to eat that food throughout the year. Um, so yeah.
yeah, I guess food
I-
storage is a big part of the sustainability over
mhm.
winter. Geez, it must be difficult to hunt then.
Yeah, I mean there's so many of these birds. This is a very sustainable practice. I mean, they could do other things to catch them, but instead this method of catching them this year, this way with the tool like this, it's called an epoch. This tool is called an epoch, and it's over 2,500 years old, this technology. Like they
Wow.
literally used to make them out of the baleen of a whale, driftwood and like tendon woven together to make a net. And now today, it's still the exact same tool. It's just made out of bamboo and nylon. You know, I mean, they're choosing to maintain this practice. So it's a really great example of how resilient, you know, traditions are. This is one of the hunters that we were out with looking for seals. I love
Do you have a
you
name for
know,
the traditional peoples of Greenland? Are they, is there
yes.
different nuances of it? Is there one overall blanket kind of description? Is it all sorts of
Yeah,
sub
that's a good question. So,
sub elements to the culture or different influences
yeah.
from other places that have filtered through or
Right. Yeah. So people, the broad term is Inuit, and Inuit is a term of circumpolar people that are in Canada, Alaska, and also Greenland. And within Inuit, you have different community or different sub-ethnic groups. So in northwestern Greenland, the name of that group is the Inuit. There's a GH in there. And they are ethnically and linguistically different than the rest of Greenland. And there's only about 600 Inuit people.
Mm.
So it's a very, very small number of people. And yeah, very few people who speak the language still. So
Has it very few people within their own communities because the language is dying, or very few people outside in the world that speak the language?
it's a bit of both. So the language of the Inuit people is verbal. There's no standard written form of their language.
Mm.
So schools and books and everything are written in Western Greenlandic. So a lot of the children are predominantly speaking Western Greenlandic because they're being taught through books and through TV programming and things in that language. So there's some concerns about that language disappearing. Definitely. I just love this because we were hunting for narwhals and but we're charging a smartphone with a battery pack. You know, it's just like it's so wild to me because you can be out like hunting on the land doing this is like it's a very traditional method of hunting narwhals. They hunt them from handmade kayaks with a hand-thrown wooden harpoon. Like that's how we're catching narwhals. But they can scroll TikTok while they wait for the narwhals to show up. So I think it's wild. It's kind of a trip. This is Simon, one of the children in my host family. He was so sweet. He turned 14 while we were out hunting, and he also shot his first seal. And so it's very important for a young boy to shoot a seal when he turns 14. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of cultures where that's a potent rite of passage sort of age, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Here you can see the frozen fjord. The ocean is totally full and all the icebergs trapped in it. I love that blue light that you get in the winter.
Yeah, it's a very unique color, isn't it? I've only been
Mm.
in the summer, so one day. And I guess, yeah, like people quite literally don't break down too fast or too easily, physically, I guess, like
No.
there's graves, when you've said, they bury their food in the ground because of that's how well it's preserved.
I mean, even in the summer, it was below freezing many days. So, yeah. Yeah, of course, the dogs. I love experimenting with black and white in the Arctic environment. Of
Yeah, I've enjoyed that part of your work lately too. Oh,
course,
I started doing that, John. That is great.
yeah, the polar bear pants. I mean, it's just, we live in a modern prefab wooden house and we wear polar bear pants. I just love that.
Jeez. How prevalent is the hunting and how strict are they on the kind of quotas in that regard? There's a lot of pressure globally
For bears.
on that. Yeah.
Yeah, each community is allotted a specific number every year, and they're only allowed to catch within that number. So it's quite small. I think maybe four or five in some communities, and others maybe get nine or so throughout the year. So
How do they,
it's fairly small. Oh,
going to say, how do they hunt them traditionally? Obviously, with modern times and rifles, it's a little bit different, but I'm trying to think over the thousands of years before that, how they actually, because polar bears are the fiercest hunters,
the dogs,
arguably in the world. Oh, really?
they use the dogs to hunt them. Hmm. Yeah, so when they spot a polar bear, what will happen is they'll cut a couple of dogs loose off of the sled, and those dogs will run ahead and corral the bear, and keep it at bay while the hunter can catch up with them. And today they'll use a rifle, but in the past they would use a harpoon.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. I look, I
Not
wish I
risk,
could
not
even,
risk-free.
huh, I'm sorry.
Not a risk-free pursuit.
No, in fact, a lot of dogs die doing it too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite dangerous. I wish I could convey to you how cold this day was.
You were talking
I
about, I
can't.
think it might have been one of your stories. You were talking about either the sound or something
The sound,
that
like
part of
when
the
you're
analogy of just how cold it was. Like,
just walking on, it sounded like styrofoam. And it was so cold on this day that like your fight or flight instincts actually kick in. Like I I almost couldn't think because I was so cold that I couldn't like figure out like I couldn't think clearly at all about what I was doing. I'm really glad that I got a shot. I was so cold. I was just dying out there.
how cold was
Uh,
it?
I'm sure it was like negative 30 or so. It's very cold. Very cold. Um yeah, it's just the views from the dog sled. And I love this image.
Wicked series, this one. Yeah.
Yeah. Just the
Can
gracefulness of the
you
whip.
tell us a little bit more about the relationship between the dogs and the hunters? The dynamics between them, I guess it's a little bit individualistic with certain people and their own characteristics or personalities as well, but there must be some consistent kind of practices or where is their separation, where is their communion, where is their love, where is their service, where is their just cold-heartedness and,
Mm.
relationship that most of us don't share with an animal like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a dog lover, it would really hurt you, I think. Um, it's not to say that I don't know how to describe it fairly. It's a different culture, and I think that you have to abandon your world views at the door when you go somewhere that operates this different. When if you're in a community where the line between life and death or survival or persistence is this thin, you know, I think that there's just very different cultural practices. And so the dogs in general, it's not that they're not treated well, but they are not pets, right? And so most of the dog handlers will roll with fear, you know? But also there's respect between them. The dogs are rewarded for their work, but they're motivated uh, by fear as well. So, you know,
Or in this case,
the
is it the sound or the physicality of a whip that they might?
they do not hit the dogs with the whip uh, as a general practice. I'm not saying no one does, but generally they don't. But the dogs are still afraid of the sound of it. They'll generally strike the ice around the dogs to tell them what direction to turn. So, um, yeah.
And
And
what are
in
the?
this particular, I'm sorry.
Oh, you go. I was just wondering what actually the sleds are made of in terms of what resources they have. Must I mean, wood must be almost an impossible resource at all. They've obviously got hides, and I don't know how do they create the physical structures. What are the?
Yeah. I mean, they import wood now, and the runners are plastic, a type of plastic that's nailed onto the bottom. But, you know, they're all handmade. You know, people purchase wood or they strip down old sleds and then they'll make new ones. And
Exactly. Yeah.
if you look at the knot work on it, it's actually like an art form. Like it's very specific how they fit together.
Yeah. Look, the craftsmanship is very, very apparent,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
the individuality as well.
Definitely. People definitely have their own individual styles with it, different knot work or different color ropes that they'll use and all types of different purposes for their sleds.
What's the ratio of dogs to people? And obviously, there's different purposes, I guess, if they're trying to ferry a large amount of heavy material as opposed to just people, or but I'm trying to get a sense of the
Yeah.
ratio, that you need per relative.
Most dog teams will be between 8 to 15, 16 dogs.
It's quite big, yeah.
Yeah. There's a big range kind of depending on what you're doing. Um, this was a day that we were out hunting for seals on the ice. The light was just perfect this day.
Is that the polar bear pants or another pair of polar bear
Oh
pants?
yeah. Polar bear pants, polar bear. The pants are polar bear. The kamiks, the boots are seal skin with the fur on the inside. And then the gloves are actually made of fox fur with the ruff is actually polar bear. And then the hood on the jacket is dog. It's dog fur.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. It looked a little bit different. And yeah,
Yeah.
and from my
Nothing.
understanding is Arctic fur is the warm, it's Arctic fox fur is the warmest in the world.
Yeah, a lot of the gloves are Arctic fox, and they are so soft. Let me tell you, I really wanted a pair.
Yeah, they're like silk.
Yeah, they're amazing. Hmm.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, one of the dog teams.
Yeah,
It's kind of a fine line because the dog teams are the dogs can be aggressive. You know, they are you're not going to pet these dogs. And so it's definitely a fine line when you're photographing them because, like, I want to get low and be at their level, but you have to know exactly how long their line is because I've been lunged at so many times
I
by
was just gonna
dogs.
say, like, there's a beautiful sense of poise and dignity here, probably more than I've ever seen actually in such a large collection of dogs at the same time. But you can also get that sense of menace as well.
Yeah, they are fearsome, that is for sure. They do not mess around.
And I think, being at that like below eye level really kind of emphasizes that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be difficult though. It can be scary. I get scared. I've been lunged at a couple of times by the sled dogs, so I'm very, very wary of them. You definitely have to know exactly how long that line is.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, look at that.
Just
Magenta.
just walking out on the sea ice. I mean, so when I was up there over the winter, I would go for walks on the sea ice all the time. And these huge, massive icebergs are just trapped on the ice, so you can just walk for kilometers and look for all the different shapes in the ice and explore and explore the light and the landscape. Plus, walking is the only way you're going to stay warm. So,
I was gonna say, like, what's your, you must have a almost like a limit to how long you can be out there in conditions like this as well, I guess.
yeah, I mean, if you're moving, I found that as long as I'm moving, I'll be okay for quite a while. But if you stop to take a picture, you need to be moving again pretty quickly. Yeah, especially when you're that far out. I
Perfect
mean,
setup you have with gloves. I find that one of the more interesting parts.
uh,
It's,
it's
everybody's
so
got different
tricky.
ideas, and I still haven't figured out the perfect arrangement, but I'm curious what yours is,
For
particularly
me, I do
photographic.
the Hestra three finger gloves. So your index finger is free, and then the others are in a mitten. And that way I can manage my camera pretty easily.
You have an underlay
Yeah.
as well, or literally
Oh
those?
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, you have to have an underlayer. And then, if I'm not actively using my hands, then I have like a shell mitten that will go over. So it's really like a three-layer glove system. And that usually does pretty good.
Yeah, it's the amount of conversations I've had for people around gloves. It's as photographers, it's a big one. Well, I mean,
There's no perfect glove.
yeah, I haven't found one yet either.
No.
But just thinking about it because I'm packing this week for Svalbard. So,
Yeah.
oh yeah, oh my God.
Yeah. I found this little heart in the ice. I couldn't help myself. And
Oh,
I mean the
it's a lot
perfect
like it's a bit like
light.
Tasmania, Taylor.
I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. This perfect heart.
Why
And
would
then
you?
the light was just unbelievable and it was just amazing. Perfect sunset. I mean, this is the
How long was
Arctic.
that light kind of sitting there? I guess there's certain times of year where the sun just skims along the horizon like
Hours.
that for a long, long time. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in the winter time, the sun just stays and you'll have hours of sunset and then it just comes right back up and you have hours of sunrise and I mean it's just the quality of the light is just beyond it cannot be described. It just cannot. Yeah.
And difficult to capture well. I know enough to know that.
Well, it's just you have to
But to
be
represent,
able to
yeah.
yeah, you have to be able to represent that. And also the blue light can be really difficult to manage because ice can reflect so deeply blue. And I find that a lot of clients that I work with, they struggle to edit ice well because of that blue cast that you get that's so intense. So trying to figure
Yeah,
out how to work with blues is hard.
as soon as you try and move the files in any direction, it becomes a really big factor, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Takes a lot of patience, but yeah, those are my Greenland photos. So,
Any tips on editing ice?
less blue. I often will go into the color channels like the hue, saturation, luminance, and I will manage the blues pretty heavily. That is really where a lot of the heavy lifting is going to happen is how you manage blue.
Yeah, that's sound advice there. I'll be doing a little bit
Yeah.
of blues very soon. It's been a little while.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
I got a
Well,
personal question. You're sitting there.
sure.
I'm in three layers of thermals. You're in a singlet top. I don't, and you're actually in Vegas. And I remember you putting a story of this beautiful art creation you've had
Oh,
placed on your body. Is there a
yeah.
symbolism around that, or a story, or it's pretty
Huh?
magnificent? And whoever you were doing it with, I've never seen like skin-based artwork anything like it. It was incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Let me my camera has lost focus. Let me refocus it. There we go. Yeah, so I got a tattoo last year. And yeah, it's a design that I came up with myself for. years, but I was just waiting for an artist that I trusted to do circles, which is a challenge. But I found an artist finally who I felt was confident he would be able to do the circle work the way that I wanted it. But for me, the symbolism is because I work in the polar regions most of the year, and the midnight sun, I always have the sun on my shoulder. Like I'm under the sun more than just about anyone I know because when I'm in the northern hemisphere, there's no sunset. When I'm in Antarctica, there's no sunset. So I'm just always under the sun. And that was the meaning for me.
I have to think about mine. I'm just about to have a month of just that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be in Iceland during the solstice and Svalbard shortly after, so it doesn't get much longer than that. So
Yeah.
it's very different, eh? I find it easier than I thought to lean into it. The only thing I have trouble with is actually remembering to sleep because you can keep going and going. And in some ways, unless there's some established routine or you force one on it, like you can just go till you burn, which I've done
Yeah.
times where I remember waking up on day three and I don't think I hardly slept and I was at a gas station. I must have fallen asleep right after I got gas and never even made it out of the car park. I was just so tired. I was just like,
You,
oh my God, I'm in the same car park from last night. I was like, what time is it? I was like, oh God.
yeah. You have to be the master
Oh,
of the micro nap. The micro nap is king.
okay,
Like,
okay. Yeah. I was just discussing that with a friend of mine who's coming with me on this next trip, how we want to manage that. And I've never taken an eye mask before either. I just drift off, but I might try one this time just to fabricate that a little bit, when I'm trying to switch my body off a bit. Um, but
yeah,
it's
it's a
yeah, it's
challenge.
different. But I'm looking forward to being there. I think it's also, yeah, that weekend of the 20th and 21st in Iceland is their Independence Day as well. So it's going to be cool to be there to see how they
Oh,
celebrate.
that's cool.
Yeah, it'd be a little bit different. So
Yeah.
when are you heading back? You've got a winch workshop in September, I believe, through Northeast Greenland and over to Svalbard, yeah?
Yeah, so I get to go back to Greenland in September and I'm so excited. And but before that I'll be in Svalbard. I head to Svalbard in about 2.5 weeks.
Oh, I'm going to miss you by a week, I think. I'm there from when do I arrive? Um, yeah, 30th of June. So
Okay.
you're just a week gone, I think, by then. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll already be out. That's a bummer.
Ah, yeah, it'd be
That
fun.
would have been wild to meet at the
Well, I
North
think
Pole.
yeah, it would be kind of cool. Let's hang out at the Husky Cafe and catch up on some. I do love the Husky Cafe there. I don't know if you got any favorite spots there.
Oh man, what's the name of the cafe that's like it's like a mine. Like the inside of it when you walk in it, it's like you're
Oh,
in
I
a
don't think it's that
mine.
one. Yeah.
Oh, I'll look it up. I'll have to send it to you. You have to go there. It's such a cool experience.
We'll have an offline chat because that's not necessarily. There's very specific information that one that a lot of people will get to. Oh, have you been out to Pyramid or the Russian village yet? The Russian
Mm-mm.
I don't there or anything. I
No, I've never been out there.
was looking at doing it, and then I realized there's a lot of animosity now with Ukrainians and Russia, and there's a lot of people that work that are Ukrainian in that area, and there's a lot of animosity because Russia has a big role. And overall in Svalbard, relative to Norway, they're the two big powers kind of wrestling around it a little bit. And
Mm.
there's certain organizations that have banned like even advertising trips out there now in Svalbard, like for that
Oh,
reason.
that's interesting.
That's a Russian run town. And I was kind of like, you know what? I actually will let that go because I really wanted to go. Like photographing a snapshot of a frozen village of Russian life is not something I've ever had the potential
Yeah.
access to do, and it's literally just a few hours up the road from where I am. So as a photographer, I've been really intrigued by doing that. But as a humanitarian as well, I'm kind of like, you know what, I think I might just honor leaving that
Yeah.
to respect the people because a lot of the crew are often Ukrainian or the ships are working on as well, and I mean they find a way to deal with it, but it's yeah, I've just decided to let that go, but I'm sort of like, oh, I don't know when I'm going to be back again or if it'll ever happen. But
Yeah, it's
I don't
tough.
know. Have you been outside of? Have you been on any land-based journeys in Svalbard or?
No, I've only been on the
Yeah,
ship-based
yeah.
travel.
Thanks. So I
Yeah.
kind of wonder, I guess, different seasons because if you hadn't been there before, you go in there, there's often only 2,000 people in the town, but there's 5,000 snowmobiles floating floating around the town of various descriptions, and And goodness me, they know how to use them. So it's yeah. How would you describe the characteristics of both the landscape and people and culture in Svalbard? Like, my understanding is it doesn't have an Inuit population. It doesn't have an
Mhm.
old lineage of people. It was only really found, I think, in late 1600s, I think, and that was by trappers, I believe. But
Yeah, there's no indigenous community in Svalbard.
just rare for anywhere on Earth, really, to be able to say that genuinely. And I wonder how that has impacted, the wildlife there, because they just haven't had that influence of man for relative to most places in the world that have had for so much longer. And I don't know how, from an environmental perspective, how that compares to Greenland. They're both on parallel in terms of how fast they're kind of changing relative to the climate shifts, or is one more than the other, or have you sort of made any comparisons?
I think across the Arctic, there's very broad and dramatic warming trends. There's so much evidence to support that. Especially around Svalbard, the ice has been really inconsistent, particularly the or I'm sorry, the western side of Svalbard in recent years. So I do know that that has created some issues. In terms of the wildlife, I'm not exactly sure about the difference between like human versus non-human. That I had a wonderful interview with a girl who lives in Northwest Greenland, but she is Western educated in Denmark. And we had a very lengthy conversation where she talked about how uh, the people in Northwest Greenland have lived there off the land for 4,500 years. So the wildlife is very adapted to being hunted. So, like, that relationship between humans and animals is so long established that that is the natural order of things. Like, hunting them is not unnatural, and it would be unnatural to not hunt them because that is the balance that's been created over thousands of years. So I'm not sure about the difference for Svalbard. There's no hunting there, so at least they're well protected.
Yeah, yeah, the rules are getting more and more intense actually. Like I think they've made it 500 meters now away from polar bears, and then you have to literally move away when you see them. You can't even sort of wait around. Um,
Yeah.
there was a time where if they were coming to you, that's fine, to some extent, but yeah, it's shifting away, and I guess they're incredibly. We've kind of hinted at that fragility. I guess you kind of probably had that conversation to death in a way, but it's probably worth just touching on. Like I was curious in your lifetime, like with how fast things are changing. And I know that you spoke about the dynamism of ice being different every time anyway, but have you literally seen in your short time frame of being there from a global perspective, have you seen climate change at work?
I think people want to hear like some dramatic story, but the reality is that the scales of these things is just so long that I don't have like a particular personal story, except for just noting some of the areas that I've camped in Western Greenland that have been permafrost, like when I first visited there, that are no longer permafrost. So they're more of like a marshy bog area now. So, that is definitely part of a warming trend. But beyond that, it's really hard to, as one individual, it's very hard to point at one exact thing. That doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means that, the scale of these things is so hard to see and to show and to visualize. And part of that is why it's so hard to do anything about it because um, it's not so tangible to most people.
Yeah.
You can't like point at it and be like, here, this is it. It's really difficult.
Yeah, I mean it's funny. Like I reviewed a bunch of photographers in Tasmania, one in particular called Grant Dixon, and he did a book on the winter snow landscapes in Tasmania the last 40 years, and no one else has done anything quite like it. And he walks this land more than anyone I know alive, who has in modern time, and he's very clear that there's no way I'd ever be able to produce this book again. And the
Mm,
patterns and the changes in Tasmania are so distinctive in that few decades that there's this massive delineation. Even this is just right outside my doorstep on the mountain that traditionally is covered in snow. Often 50 days a year, even since I've been here. That last year was only like maybe just a number of days. So it's sort of knocking on the door. I mean, yeah, that's a whole probably show in itself, so we won't go too far down
Yeah.
that road.
I
But
would just say like my advice is to like I look to indigenous knowledge for that information because they live there on the land all the time. And so they have personal accounts of these changes. They can talk in depth and in detail about the difference in the ice coverage and the difference in the thickness of the ice. And they can have very lengthy conversations with you about that. So when they speak, I listen.
what's the essence of your findings from the PhD so far? If you could sort of summarize it before we sort of move on.
Sure, yeah. So the essence of the findings, what my work tried to do is I tried to capture local perspectives rather than Western perspectives of what the challenges are in their lives. And so what the data actually captured is that they don't actually view climate change as a challenge. Now, I know that sounds contradictory, but bear with me. So they represent climate change as a change in their life that they are able to adapt around, and the challenge that they see in their life is actually about the regulations. So the local perspective is that they're highly adaptable and they can adapt to a warming climate even if it is dramatic, but all of the rules prevent them from doing so. And so, yeah, so reflecting that is actually unique because that's not a perspective that gets told very often. I think in general, we are fed a lot of dramatic imagery about, the climate crisis in the Arctic being the main threat. And the lived experience for the people there is that the regulations are actually the biggest problem for them
And I guess an element of of tourism as well.
as a problem.
Yeah, is that having a big influence? Like the amount of cruise ships that are coming in now, and just
There,
the limitation of resources they have, and and these big intense bursts of people coming in, basically leaning into their resources and probably not giving much back. I wonder about that.
oh my God, this is like one of my favorite things to talk about.
Oh, look out!
Oh, look, if you listen to this discussion on YouTube and you think you want to go to Greenland, I beg you to not go on a commercial cruise. I beg of you. Don't go on one of these large cruise ships because they are owned by multinational organizations that are crewed by non-Greenlandic Western people that are guided by non-Greenlandic Western people that feed you and house you, that sell souvenirs that are not produced in Greenland. And you get on that ship and you walk on shore and then you get back on that ship and none of your money went into that community. Every bit of your money just sails away with you. And all you've done is trample on their landscape, flush their toilet, strain their power grid, eat their, raid the grocery store. And these are communities where they get groceries like twice a year. You know, if you go buy that bag of candy, they're not getting another ship for like 4 months.
Yeah,
Please don't do it.
you've
Do
done
not
a
do it.
great summary of exactly what I've had on my mind for a while as well, and yeah, and I guess it's the accessibility of those areas to the cruise ships is crazy. Like I never would have thought that would have been somewhere they had the means to go or allowed to go, but it's sort of like, wow, it's not lessening, it's growing, if anything. And I've heard they're building
I,
another airport in Greenland as well, in the east. Is that right?
There are three new airports being built. The one in Nuuk has already opened. But there's no, for example, in Ilulissat, this airport will open next year. It will have direct flights from the US, but there's no infrastructure to support additional flights. As it currently stands, there's like a year-long waiting list for a hotel room in Ilulissat if you want to go there. So I don't know what is going to happen when you have planes coming in, but no places for people to stay. Also, like the tourism is just, it's not a sustainable development model in most of these communities because the tourism season is 2 to 2.5 months. No one in Greenland has money to open a tourist shop that only operates 2 to 2.5 months. So the tourist shops you see are primarily foreign investments or Danish people who have invested money in this business, but they're generally not local people. because local people can't afford to have a job that only exists for 2 months. They need a real job that lasts all year, like any other normal person does. I have personally witnessed like 400 people being offloaded from a cruise ship into a community of 29 people.
Oh my God.
Like
Oh
I
my
have
God.
watched that. It is
And they could
so
just
sickening.
strip the resources bare or in a day, mate. Oh my God.
Yeah. And I don't want to sound like a hypocrite because you can go on my website and see that I run trips in Greenland. So I think it's really important to add the caveat that the trips that I run in West Greenland, I have worked tirelessly to make sure that I am hiring a local company to run those trips to get out on the boats. And I make sure that we book at the only hotel that is owned by a co-op of local community members. And I know which restaurants in town are owned by locals. And if you want to go to West Greenland and your guide doesn't know that information, they should not be guiding there. All right. Because, like, it's your responsibility to have ethical tourism in these really peripheral places that struggle to access global resources. My trip that I run in Northeast Greenland, there are no communities there. So we do charter a small ship and we're only 12 people. If we could hire local, we would, but there's no local option. There's no community. I mean, there's literally no village there. It's just mountains and glaciers. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's some of the most incredible ones on Earth. Just in case you're wondering.
Yes.
Oh, come.
Seriously. Come on, Paul. Let's go.
Tyler,
But no, I do just want to like, I think it's our responsibility as photographers to do our due diligence and make sure when we go somewhere that we're doing it ethically. Like, these places aren't free, not just in terms of money, but in terms of, the carbon emissions to get there and like where does your money go when it gets there and what is your impact in that community when you're traipsing around in all of this wilderness? Like, what's the impact of that? And it's our responsibility to actively think about that.
yeah, I mean, you answered the question before asked it. How do we, and that is very much a sphere that I spend a lot of time reflecting on as well. And that's a conversation with all of us that work internationally as well, or work in remote areas. And even in Tasmania, we have a very sensitive landscape here. 60% of our endemic flora and fauna is found nowhere else on Earth. And once it's gone, it's gone. And photography has a role in educating people, but also it can put areas at higher risk of pressure and threat of being damaged through that visual kind of connection with people that then they want to reach out and engage with that as well. So it's such a fine line. I mean, I guess you've answered it, I think, from that tourism perspective, but as an image maker in general, from the places you're in the world, and you are going to other places with different levels of sensitivity, both culturally and environmentally as well.
Mm,
How do you within your own sphere? Because I guess you can only really answer for yourself. I don't know where Much
yeah.
fit for the sphere of that as well, because they are a global kind of company in terms of their ethical and moral kind of codes around the sustainability of their workshops and so on.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for myself, I think a lot about my representation, especially working with Indigenous communities. So, like, how am I representing these communities and am I honoring them through my representation? So, for example, you'll see in a lot of my pictures of the hunters, you know, sometimes occasionally they're wearing like traditional polar bear pants, but in other times they're wearing hoodies and baseball caps. I do not ask people to dress up for me for pictures, but most photographers do. I can tell you, like, I'm not the very first person to ever photograph this hunting community in Northwest Greenland. There are some very famous photographers who have wonderful images from there, but generally they are asked to wear certain types of attire to portray their indigeneity in like a stereotypical way. And I do not think it's ethical to commodify their culture in that way, to like treat someone's cultural heritage or their traditions as like the symbolic image for you to do what with. Like you're benefiting from someone else's cultural image. right, with that image. And so I think it's really important to think about the ethics of that before you ask someone to dress up for an image or for a Native American tribe to dance for a photo or whatever it may be. Is this like a realistic representation or is this a stereotypical representation that only benefits you as the photographer and does not benefit that individual? You know, I just ask the people that I photograph to be themselves and to simply exist. And the people that I photograph, I don't take pictures when we first go out. I build a relationship. We spend time together and we develop trust. And then eventually I'll bring a camera into the equation. But I don't ask for people to pose or do anything like that. And those are my personal ethics. I know that other people have different approaches on this, and you know, each situation is different. I recognize that. But I hope that people who are photographing these communities take time to think about that representation and whether or not it honors the reality of that community.
Have you had much feedback through the process and the reflection of the images that you've taken within and around the community? Do you share them with them? Do they have access to them? Is there a disassociation? Is there only a few individuals that are kind of curious about how the images work out?
Yeah,
I'm often doing this as well. I travel a lot, and I think, well, how can I use this process to be not only make a connection for myself, but actually honor them or their family, or is there
for
something
sure.
in their life, or how can this process be a two-way street?
Oh yeah. I
From
mean,
the
I
really from the photographic perspective, rather than the big sort of picture philosophical, but in the day-to-day raw photographic realm, how does that
mhm.
dance sort of work, or how have you played with
I
that?
mean, to me, my photographs of the people are community property. So
Right.
the people that I photograph, I do provide them with those images. They can use them any way they wish. I do not care. They can print them on their wall, they can put them on their social media. I don't care what they do with them. It is fine with me, because they help me create that. It's their representation, and that's just where I stand on it. I know that I'm not the most famous photographer or anything, so maybe my thought process would be different if I was, but ultimately, I think that the images I create of them belong to them also. Um, I also, when I was up there in the winter, they had a dog sled race, and this is like a very, very, very big deal in Greenland. Like, it's not like a casual thing. This is like the national dog sled race. Like, people travel from huge distances to compete in this. And, so I have a drone with me. And so I'm a pretty dang good drone pilot. And so I was able to do this really cool, like super dynamic videography of all the action and the intensity of this dog race and the fights between the dogs and all of this. And I put it all together. And there are 57,000 people in Greenland, and I think that my video was shared almost 30,000 times. So I'm pretty sure every person in Greenland saw this video. But
Oh,
and the
wow.
thing is, like, I don't care. I posted it. I posted it to their community pages and just made it public, and then I gave the file to as many people as asked for it, and it just went crazy. And every single season it seems to go viral again. Like earlier this year
Such a
when they had
great,
the race, it was just like all over Greenland again.
such a great example,
But
Taylor.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just so fun. It's fun for me. And like, they're never going to know that I filmed it, and I don't care. Like, it was a really exciting way to showcase their culture and to like give back to this community that has given so much to me. So that was fun. Yeah. I always look for an opportunity like that.
I just told the story, I think 2 days ago. I was invited into a very remote Aboriginal community just after COVID, and there hadn't been anyone outside of the community in there for a year and a half. And that meant some of the kids that had grown up not even seeing a white person yet. And in modern time, that's not that common. And I was brought in as a drone pilot to actually to film a celebration because the Wallumajarri language was dying. And
Mm,
And the community had actually reached out before COVID to see if they could get a few people and linguists to wrap around the community and come up with ideas to help lift the language and spread it out in the world. And they decided to do a performance-based approach where they pulled all the local kids in to do a Dreamtime story approach. And the older ladies and men were actually building, designing the Dreamtime stories out of just rubbish and old tents and different things of the creatures and beings as part of the story, and the kids were taught the old language to weave through. And as my job as a drone pilot was to film the performances
mm,
physically of these big structures and the dances, and someone else was doing the sound and the stills, and it was just such a gift to be there. There was no exchange financially whatsoever. I just felt like it was just an utter honor to even be there. So it makes me smile when I think what you did. Mine was on a much smaller scale, but it was just the heart filling you can get from the purposefulness of recognizing what you can offer a community like that through your quite specific skill set as an imager.
yeah.
It's like,
I've actually, yeah, I've thought a bit about, like the ethics of even like monetizing these images, and I have done some print sales that monetize them, but I've chosen because it's what feels right for me. Is that I've chosen that any of the proceeds from monetizing the images that were taken in that community, that money actually funds a film that is being made in collaboration with that community. So the money is actually being redirected back into a visual project that is collaborative, that showcases the community's culture and represents their language for the world. So yeah, I think it's just important to think about like who benefits from the art that we create, right? It's not a sticky issue when you're just taking a picture of rocks. But as soon as you're talking about, like a culture and like you're visually representing it, so are you honoring it? And then who benefits from that transaction? And what does that say about, the persistence of colonialism today, right? So like this colonialist tendency that we can still commodify this culture and take what's useful out of it and somehow personally benefit from that is a perspective that I don't vibe with.
I've been watching the development of that film for a time. Where is that at the moment?
Yeah, so we're working on the final cut. Ashley is working tirelessly on the final cut, and we are aiming to submit it to the major film festivals this fall.
Oh, she's coming! She's coming! Look out, everyone!
Yes.
Knocking on
Yeah.
the door.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening. I have seen the
Years and
previous
years.
version of the rough cut, and it is amazing. It's really, really good. We're very proud of it. I think it's gonna perform really well.
Yeah, I again, it's one of those examples of higher purpose through the visual realm and collaboration and also, stoicness, there's not a huge backing behind it and you haven't been afraid to ask and get people involved, which takes a
Yeah.
certain courage and vulnerability and I guess it makes it more, I don't know, pure is the right word, but it kind of does in a way. It's not a lot of outside influences or strings attached to the whole process and to me that lends a purity to its purpose and maybe
Yeah.
its outcome, which
It has been a struggle. I'll be totally honest with you. It's been an uphill battle, but because of that, we are 100% crowdfunded. So we have over 400 donors that from around the world, from all kinds of countries that have donated small amounts, medium amounts, large amounts to make this film a reality. So we have this whole army of people that have, helped try to bring this vision to life. Part of that means that it has been a shoestring budget trying to film in one of the most expensive places in the world. So things have been slow, they haven't happened at a speed like that would be if we had like a huge corporate sponsor. But that means that, Ashley's creative vision is able to be fulfilled and we're able to really take our time with it. So trust me, the instant gratification, I would love for it to be done right now. But but yeah, it's gonna get there. It's gonna get there and it'll be worth the wait. It's amazing.
So Taylor, how could some of our viewers engage with where it's at or get a sense of what the project's about? Is there certain
Yeah.
got a bit of material on your website, for instance, but
Yeah, there's a tab on my website, Greenland Film. You can read about it and watch the trailer. The trailer only includes summer footage, but we have some insane winter footage that will be in the final film. That'll give you kind of an overview of the narrative as well. You can always donate. It is a nonprofit, so you're always able to donate to the nonprofit.
well,
Um,
I mean, we're very supportive of everyone who comes on the show to have absolutely free license of anything they want to suggest or promote or go to people.
yeah.
You can even load up the page now if you want to show people where it is, so they
Oh, yeah, totally.
might as well.
Uh, yeah, give me one moment and I can do that.
It's
Um, let's see
another
the
bridge for people to cross to this beautiful project.
sure.
Yeah, all the best with that, Taylor. That's yeah, that's a hell of a journey. Not I know that much about it, but I've certainly been watching it for a few years now and tapping in with where you're at and getting a sense of the just the heart and soul and grit and blood and tears and everything else in between that's gone to pulling this into the world.
Yeah, it has been a labor of love. All right.
That's a legacy that's going to live longer than you probably, so
Yeah, and my partner for the film, Ashley, I we collaborated on this for a reason. She specializes in telling Indigenous stories from Indigenous perspectives. That is her very, very specific documentary niche, and she's incredible at it. She has an amazing YouTube channel where she does that. So on my website, you can go to Greenland Film, and then there's the trailer. You can support our project. And then we have had some brand backers that have supported us with like equipment and other types of technical support. Yeah, and you can always contribute. Here's our team. And of course, I have a link to some of Ashley's previous films because she has a really amazing body of work. So if you want to get lost on YouTube for a little while, you can check out some of her work
yeah,
at Tracing
I've got a
Thought.
little bit lost every now and again on that too.
Yeah, yeah, she has a wonderful, really, really wonderful body of work. But we cannot wait for this film to come out. And um, oh, the other thing to mention, it's not, I mean, donate if you want. We would love some donations, but um, the film, because of the way that the competitive major film festivals work, we cannot premiere the film. The major festivals have to have premiere rights. So we cannot publicly share this film until that has all happened, and that will take many months. So the loophole for that is that people who have donated to this project are considered cast and crew. And so, if you are considered cast and
Excellent.
crew, you'll be in the credits and you will be invited to a cast and crew screening. So, you'll get to see the film like months before anyone else. So, anyone who donates will be invited to
Excellent.
that.
Great
Yeah.
loophole, Taylor. Well done.
Yeah. So, if you want to see the film early, we have to take every advantage we can get, right?
Yeah, I mean we do. It's yeah, especially with something that's just born out of pure heart, really. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
that's
and ultimately we're angling to be on a streaming platform. So we have no intention of releasing it on YouTube. So
yeah. So you got to keep the life of it, with a bit of, I guess, focus and integrity. I guess you never know where it's going to go once it's out on YouTube. It's just it's kind of gone into ether in a way.
yeah. Yeah, some type of streaming platform is the goal. And I think the advantage is Greenland's a pretty hot topic right now. So hopefully we'll be
Yeah.
able to get
Oh
on one.
God, hot is a relative word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Think of orange face orangutans and climate change and going on. Hot's kind of the word,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. It's yeah. I'm going to be waving from it from across at Svalbard soon. So if I can find a way to get over there, I'm still chipping away.
Yeah.
I
I
feel
see a trip to Greenland in your future.
yeah, just a matter of when. I mean, every time I do a big trip, I kind of feel like it's such a privilege because I wonder personally, even, the world's changing so fast that there's a lot of unrest happening, and and it's such a privilege to be able to do these big trips that I don't feel any time that I almost feel funny about planning into the future because I'm like, well, I don't know what's going to happen or how tenable things are going to be, and so I try and squeeze every last drop out of every trip I do, just to the nth degree. Partly in honor
Yeah.
of the kind of carbon footprint I'm leaving on the world by doing it. The people and cultures that I go to, same as you. Everywhere I go, I try and learn some language or think about how I can give back or operate sustainably while I'm there with who I stay with or how I spend the money I have and then also think, well, how can I celebrate this with the world and make the most of the opportunity, not on behalf of everybody else who doesn't have the privilege that I do to do it. So I think we have some big parallels there, Taylor. So it was real. I kind of
Yeah.
jumped in a few times my own story, and I probably didn't need to, partly because I was excited to feel that beautiful parallel. And I think it's why I've been drawn to you and your work for so long, and why it's finally such a beautiful thing to hear it in person, and everyone who's watching this will probably nod their head and going, "Oh, I can see why, brother." You know, I kind
Well,
of feel like
thank you so much.
I know you've prepared a whole bunch of other things to and different rabbit holes to go down, but I kind of feel like that could be a whole nother show.
Yeah.
And
Well, you can invite me back anytime. I'm happy to pop
totally up to
in.
you. We kind of we've sort of nudged past our traditional length of time, and I feel like I don't know if I'll be honoring you by just squeezing some things at the end, but it's also completely up to you if you want to. Um,
Yeah, we'll save 'em for the future.
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was really looking forward to seeing crazy comic shots and shark photos and all these other things, and also giving people a sense of the breadth of who you are as a visual artist, and because we've sort
Okay, well, I mean, if you want, I can tease you really quickly.
of, a quick te maybe a quick teaser.
I'll give you a quick tease on some of the stuff that I've been working on.
So Taylor's
So,
a little like me, like she thrives on variety of genres as well. Um,
I don't just photograph ice. I've been really obsessed with shark photography. This is like my new obsession. So I've been spending a lot of time in the water, working with sharks and trying to find a way to portray these beautiful and elegant animals the way that they should be portrayed, not as fearsome creatures, but as like a vital part of the ecosystem and just downright poetic.
never seen
So.
anything like that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful light dancing off of a bull shark. It's a lemon shark.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was a lemon.
Yeah.
It's a very poetic image. It's so graceful and so well placed and so cohesive and so connecting all at the
Mm.
same time, you know,
You
which
know, sharks are just, they get a bad rap, man.
uh,
They're so beautiful and when you're in the water working with them, they are very calm and it's really remarkable that your ability. I can't think of any other animal on Earth that you can be within inches of that's an apex predator that you have nothing to protect you. I mean, even a lion on safari, you're in a car, but with these sharks, I mean, they literally are swimming between your legs. I mean, it's just really an incredible experience. And I think it's important that people see them in that way.
oh man. Oh,
Another,
Thresher? What's that one?
it's
Nursefish?
a lemon shark. Yeah, it's a big old lemon shark.
How wide a lens are you using there? That tail looks so humongously long.
Oh, I use a 15. I have an image in here that shows you how close we get. That's we're
That's pretty close. I think it was closer than that.
I mean, you occasionally do have to redirect the shark and tell them where you want them.
Yeah.
I have a scratch on the glass of my dome from the tooth of a lemon shark because it wasn't respecting my personal space and I kept having to push it off of me. But
Wow, okay.
it's just they're curious. And as long as, you're not reckless, they're pretty safe to be in the water with.
Jeez.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Different places around the world or certain areas in particular you focus on for photography?
Um, I've been working in Florida, off the east coast of Florida primarily. I'd love to do it elsewhere, but I haven't had the opportunity. Um, Actually, that's not true. I just got to see some hammerhead sharks in the Galapagos, although that was incidental. It was not an intentional shark trip, but it was pretty cool. I mean, hammerheads can be up to 11 feet long. They're very big. So.
And I've seen some photos of massive schools of them together as well.
Yeah, I'm actually after I got that taste of the hammerheads and the Galapagos, I am toying with the idea of doing a trip just for that to the Galapagos, because I can't resist. The temptation is too strong.
I'm not even going to ask you about. I was thinking about asking about your bucket list, but that could be a very long conversation.
Well, I hate to think of things in terms of bucket lists, but I do have some big ideas. So,
Any teasers?
oh well, time will tell, time will tell.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what comes to fruition.
Wow.
So another bull shark.
Is that a
I
puffer?
mean, it's at 15 millimeters. I mean, he was like 6 inches from my lens. They're so
Yeah.
close.
I don't think everybody understands how close you need to be to get a wide angle shot looking like that.
Yeah. This is really cool. This one bull shark was doing like a surface breach where they come up out of the water. So that was neat. Right in front of me.
It's interesting. It's almost like feels like a community evolving around, the movement of this one larger being. It's quite interesting.
Oh yeah. Like the
I don't know.
remoras that are below it, they literally like attach themselves to the sharks and they'll feed off of any scraps that are left over. And these little amberjacks also do the same thing. So they create this whole little ecosystem that follows them everywhere they go.
Yeah,
Um, and those amberjacks are like maybe 18 inches long. They're big.
pretty solid,
They're
aren't
like
they?
half a meter, so if that tells you anything about how big the dang shark is.
Oh, what sort of shark is this one?
It's a bull shark.
Visible shark, yeah. Oh, it's pretty.
Yeah. So
But
that's
it's
a
rare that
little,
I've seen the Amoras before, but I this just speaks to me of community narrative and like few shots I've seen.
yeah,
This
yeah.
is it's a traveling show.
They all work together. It's all part of the whole story.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Tells
So
that story beautifully, Taylor.
yeah, there's a little tease. So I have
Yeah.
maybe 4,000 shark images from my last trip to go through. So there will be a lot more coming soon. Hopefully I'll get a little website gallery up.
Quick personal question. Why Vegas? Why is Vegas home now?
Oh, my partner lives in Vegas. So
No.
yeah. Yep.
And
Yeah.
also it has access to some of the best wilderness on earth. Just up
It
the
does, it was never on my wish list. I was a little dismayed when I met someone who lived in Vegas. But it actually is incredible and I'm obsessed with living here. I love running and climbing and hiking, and the outdoor community is just amazing. I'm 2 hours from Zion. I'm 4 hours from the Grand Canyon. I'm 2 hours from Death Valley. It's just pretty good
Yeah,
location.
and they're three of my favorite areas on earth. So that I spent a chunk of time in myself and hoping to do again soon.
Yeah, although I have to tell you, it was 40 degrees Celsius today.
Oof. Yeah, no, I picked my time.
So,
I did the Grand Canyon in winter, the 23-day trip down the Grand Canyon in midwinter. That was with snow starting. That was pretty wild, but I haven't done Death Valley in the summer. I don't think I ever will actually.
please don't. Don't do it.
No, no.
Death Valley in January is where it's at.
Yeah, I'm with you. So have you bumped into David, Mr. Thompson, while you're in there? Have you guys connected?
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, he works with Munch now actually. So, we get to
Yeah,
work
yeah.
together, we get
I
to
don't know
hang
if that
out
was something to
together,
do
we
with
shoot together.
I don't know if that was something to do with you and Matt as now as well. So there seems to be a
We'll call it a team effort.
coming together of some pretty magnificent people. Yeah, I've been quietly enjoying watching that team build from afar.
Yeah, man, it's I don't say this lightly. Like it is such an honor to work with people that I absolutely admire and also just love working with. I love all of the people that I work with. We are such a good team. We get along, we're very compatible, and the skill set that is on the team is just incredible.
Oh, I love seeing that one you did with Matt recently. Was it the Chilean fjords or? Oh,
Oh my God, that trip was amazing.
Max, I was just like, I don't like getting FOMO, but I was getting some on that one. I can tell you that.
Yeah, there's nothing else quite like that trip. That trip is, yeah, it's up there. It's top five for me.
Yeah, I was shaking my head, just going, "What is this your job?" I was like,
No, but nobody gets to go there. Like that's such a crazy place to get to go. I mean, nobody goes to that part of the world. We're the only ship out there. It was wild.
and well, yeah, even Northeast Greenland, that's not a populated area as well for people going through. That's pretty out there.
Yeah.
So,
We try and find the niche things. Well, you just
I-
have to come up with some really good plan for Tanzania, Paul, so we can work together.
yeah, yeah, I'm wondering if they've had their
Or
own
not
study.
Tanzania, Tasmania.
Oh,
Sorry.
Tanzania's got it too. But it's, I mean, Australia's it's got its own wild uniqueness too, and I've
Yeah.
spent a time exploring it. I just spent last month on the road actually doing a aerial trip over the floodwaters arriving at Karitana Lake, yeah, which is one of the
I
largest.
loved your pictures from that. That was so cool.
And I did a 3,000 k road trip around WA to all sorts of, from sand dunes to salt mine to mines to ocean to mountains to ranges to like it's such a diverse place, Australia, and it's got some of the most unusual palettes of color and styles of creatures and the oldest culture, living culture on the planet. Like it really is a pretty astonishing part of the world.
Mm.
So have a chat to Mr. Wunsch and see if got the spotlight over this part of the world and look me up because
All right.
I'd love to do it to see if it works out there. I'll be doing it anyway in the meantime. But yeah, thanks for your time, Taylor. Thanks for
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
thanks to universe for the stars for aligning on this one window. We happen to both be around in time. It's perfect timing for me, and it seems like you're having a slight pause between trips on your lifestyle too, which is great.
Yes.
All the very best for the film. I'm looking forward to seeing the ripple of that head out into the world. That's just so many
Yeah.
of intensive work. And I've been around filmmakers and I have some friends that have done some of the projects of different kinds. And so I actually know firsthand the level of blood, sweat, tears, pain, like depths of despair, like everything in between, that people go through that really do the guts of glory approach where it's really on their own shoulders, the whole life
Hmm.
outcome of something. So hats off to both you and I don't know if there's anything you want to leave our viewers with before we sign off.
No, just thank you for sticking with my academic ramblings and all the tales about Greenland. And I hope that that inspires you to travel to that beautiful place. It is worth visiting. And
Ethically travel there.
ethically, ethically travel there. Do your research, go your own way. So, yeah, or go with me.
Yeah, potent reminder. So you have some workshops listed on your own website and also there's
Mhm.
website as well. Yeah. Do you do exclusive with them? You do some of your own as well? It's a mixture or
I work exclusively with Munch, so everything on my website are the trips that I run, but they're also listed on the Munch page.
yeah, that was my impression when I looked at it. So I was just double checking in case there's a couple of sneaky ones of your own and then I had
No,
it
no sneaky
delineated.
ones. They keep my dance card very full.
Yeah, yeah, it looks it. It's a full life. And one last question there is how you find the balance in that lifestyle. So much time
Mm.
away from home, community, family, friends, and being on the road. Like speaking, that's a personal question. I remember before the show, I said I was going to ask you that one because I'm a little curious.
Yeah, it's it took me many, many years to find, a partner and a relationship that can withstand it. My family has come to expect it. My dad has my phone location and he pings me religiously to see where I am, and I've definitely adopted a less is more when it comes to friends, right? So I have a very small group of very close friends, and I honestly don't have a lot of time for anything else. You just keep your group small, and um, it takes time to build the right community and to find the right people and to make it all work. And also, like being willing to sacrifice, you know, like. It may not always be convenient for me to fly home for 4 days between trips or something, but that 4 days might be the difference between me investing in my relationship and, not. And so you just make things happen.
Yeah, yeah. I think, from the outside perspective, it all looks like glory, and yet the reality, and anyone's
It
dream
can be lonely,
certainly
you
can be there.
know?
Yeah, present to that myself. Not quite on your scale, but I've been a guide for 25 years too, so I spent a lot of time away, and it does influence relationships and family and even a sense of home. I like the fact that I feel at home in the world, and I'm not necessarily tied to a very specific set of circumstances to feel that way. And I think it's a privilege to feel that way, and it's a way I see myself as a citizen of the world, and I feel like in some ways we all are. But I think it's just a bit more literal. I think we actually have connections and threads and communities and people and friends that are around the world, and we have I guess I feel like an invitation, if not a responsibility, to use that to educate and to lessen misunderstandings between cultures and educate and embrace kind of different languages and ways of thinking and ideologies that can soften and open all the people that we reach into our lives. And I feel like that's what I try and give back from all that's given to me, because it's a bit of a privileged position to operate like that in the world.
Yeah. No, it definitely is. I mean, there's pluses and minuses with any job, but I have to say that this job comes with very fancy window dressing. So the view from my office never sucks.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen some pretty fancy literal windows in some of your trips too. Mine have been a little bit more basic than yours, I think.
Yeah. Well, I hope that helps, Paul.
Yeah, no, that was a question for me, but at the same time, I think it tempers the outside view of somebody who maybe wants to follow through on the show and get a sense of this glamorous lifestyle, that to just say, well, yeah, there are sacrifices and challenges too, and a certain strength of character to be able to maintain that dream and be willing to navigate that in the realm of relationships in particular, is a big one. So all the best, Taylor. I will be talking to you soon, no doubt, I hope, and
Yeah.
waving at you as I'm flying into Svalbard just after you leave, and thinking about Greenland when you're wandering through there, and I'll be there in spirit for sure.
Yeah. Well, Paul, you let me know when you're ready to go to Greenland, okay?
Uh, yeah, tomorrow's looking good. Yeah, tomorrow's looking
All right,
real
let's
good.
go. Look, I'm no stranger to spontaneous plane tickets, okay?
Me neither. I can't say. I literally bought my ticket to Iceland 3 days ago, and I don't even have a ticket back from Svalbard yet, and I'm leaving next week.
Oh my God.
So,
Okay.
yeah, spontaneity is a big part of my life. Don't get me wrong there, and let's make the most of it, and let's do our part to feel like we kind of are of making the world a better place from using our gifts and the privilege of the lifestyle we have to
Yeah,
make
for
ripples out
sure.
there that are beyond us. And looking forward to seeing the film, especially. That's a very big ripple coming up into the world. So well done.
Yeah.
Well done ahead of time.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
All right.
All
Well, I'll
right.
see you when I'm looking at you, which hopefully will be soon. Please say good day to David when you see him.
I will.
And give my love to their beautiful country. I'm actually an American citizen as well, if you didn't know.
I did not.
Yeah, yeah, I've lived in America a number of times, particularly San Fran, and my mom's from Memphis, Tennessee. Oh, come back now. Come on down, Ritz and Gator.
That's a pretty good impression, Paul. You're gonna
Oh,
make me whip out my Louisiana accent in no
oh,
time.
yeah. Well, hopefully we get to crack a few jokes in person sometime soon, Taylor. So
Yeah,
well,
that would
enjoy
be
Vegas
great.
and keep well. So,
Yeah.
all
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again for the next show soon.